other's plan. Some people are saying this has been Liz Truss's plan for the economy for about the last 10 years or so. They're going to stick firm, aren't they? They're going to persevere on with this plan.
Well, they have little choice at this stage, and you're quite right. I mean, what you just think throughout the entire summer, after she'd squeaked through into the short list of two, she spent the summer wooing Conservative Party members. That's the less than 1% of the entire voting population, to her way of thinking. And, you've got to remember that, look at the demographic of the Conservative Party membership. They're generally speaking pretty well-heeled and relatively advanced in years. And, of course, so they would love tax cuts, so they lapped it up, which is how come she's the leader. But it seems to me that she's broken the first rule of politics is you never believe your own propaganda.
Thank you, Peter. Really appreciate that. Just before we let you go, Andrew, we're going to be speaking to a Conservative Party member in just a moment, a pensioner. How worried should pensioners be about that, especially if they have a defined benefits pension scheme? Because those were the schemes that were under threat. That's why the Bank of England intervened yesterday.
That's right. I think it's very concerning because if you are a pensioner, you've paid all your life into a policy, and you kind of expect, once you retire, there isn't much you can do to leverage more money because you finished working. So it's not like if you're in a workplace and the pound tanks and the government starts printing money and the value of the pension starts to decline, and maybe even some of the pension companies start to get into financial trouble, which is not, that's not impossible, then you can't just go and get an extra job on the side because you've been conditioned to expecting to rely on that income. So it's very difficult. So I think it is very concerning. And of course, doing things like bailing the bank out, bailing the economy out by printing £65 billion worth of money and buying the debt is a kind of sort of negate. It makes less confidence in fiat currency, like fixed currency, like the pound, for example, when in fact it shows that quite clearly you can influence the value of it by printing these, by actually generating more capital and buying debt. Whereas with things like cryptocurrencies or blockchain-based things, you can't, because everything's distributed on a blockchain. You cannot physically make more of them without going through the mining process. So I think we're actually going through a revolutionary period right now into the kind of digital sector, away from the paper sector. So I think right now the pensioners, unfortunately, who are very good people who've worked all their life and done the right thing and expected to have a good retirement, I think for people our age, we should look to structure our retirement in a very different way, in a more of a decentralised method, just to be safe and rely on ourselves rather than on anybody else. That's my opinion.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you very much. Economist Andrew Sachs there.
That's quite a gloomy outlook, but we are the People's Channel. We want your views on the issues of the day. And please do get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email. And let's speak to one GB News viewer and listener, Linda from Cheshire. Very good morning to you, Linda. Look, I know that you are a Conservative Party member. You're going to the conference next week. How are you feeling, this new Prime Minister, 3 weeks in? Normally, there's a bit of a honeymoon period when we all really get behind the new Prime Minister. Do you think that's already over for Liz Truss?
No, not really. I think she's had a rough ride. She's been in power, less than a month? And 12 of those days there's been a constitutional crisis. So we've not really given her a chance. I think the budget, for what it's worth, was bold. I think it was brave. I think it will encourage people to invest in the UK. Inward investment is always great. And people are saying about interest rates of 6%. When I was younger, we had interest rates of 15%. Being over 6% under a Labour government. So I'm not really sure what Keir Starmer's going on about.
The counter-argument there, Linda, is that a lot of people have done some analysis and they say that taking into account how much unsecured debt people have at the moment, because in those days people didn't have credit cards, loans, that kind of thing, a lot more people have a lot more borrowed money now, and also accounting for the price of everything now, actually 6% interest rates next year could seem like the 14 and 15% that you were talking about.
But what's become of living within your means? Well, I know people have credit cards, but it doesn't mean you've got to spend on them. What has become of living within your means, cutting your cloth and living within your means? It's getting ridiculous. And this is a
Linda,
confection
are you...
by the left-wing media.
Have you made sort of different decisions then to live within your means as a result of what's happened to the markets, the value of the pound, interest rates over, let's say, the last year or so? Has your sort of spending changed?
Well, yes, of course. You've got to be careful as you get older. I don't have a huge pension. I have a decent state pension and a very, very tiny personal pension, very small. If it vanished, it wouldn't make much difference to me. It's only about £20 a month. But of course you make allowances and you spend or not within your means. If you have a credit card and you spend and spend and spend on it, somehow that's got to be paid back. So you've got
specific
to be careful.
pension could have been at real risk yesterday if the Bank of England hadn't intervened. Does that give you confidence in how the Conservatives are managing the economy?
I think the budget was brave and I think it was bold and I think it was a true Conservative budget. We've got to give this a chance for everything to work through. I noticed that Keir Starmer is calling for the urgent recall of Parliament, but he waited until the end of the Labour conference to do it. If it had been a real crisis, he would have been talking about this on Monday.
Well, what do you make of the tank in the value of the pound reacting to that mini budget the other day?
Well, I think it's happening all over the world. Isn't it something to do with, I mean, I don't know, but isn't it something to do with a strong dollar? And aren't other currencies in other countries tanking as well? So it's not just this country, it's other countries as well.
Linda, thank you very much. It's been really good to talk to you and particularly to hear sort of a buoyant defence of the Conservative Party and enjoy conference next week. We'll be covering it here on GB News. Really appreciate your time. And I think it's really important if you've got views similar to Linda or opposite. Maybe you were yesterday looking at your pension thinking, oh my goodness, we need urgent intervention. Maybe you're sitting on the sidelines a bit thinking, I realise this isn't great, but I don't really understand the infrastructure of why and how. Today we're going to kind of do our best to try and explain and unpack it all for you. But get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Yeah,
let's look at how businesses are dealing with eye-watering energy bills. That government help hasn't arrived yet, but it's on its way. At the moment, though, pub chain Wetherspoons has announced this week it'll be selling 32 UK sites because of losses of up to £30 million.
Well, rather than facing closure, some businesses are becoming quite inventive to try and keep down costs.
Yeah, like the Mason's Arm pub in Cornwall. They've introduced Lights Out Mondays, where the bar is entirely lit by candles.
Well, we're joined now by the landlords, Kate Chandler-Woods and Alan Woods, to show us how it looks. A very good morning. I think probably at about 6:15, candlelight maybe is appropriate. Just explain why you've decided to do this Monday nights.
It came originally from opening an electricity bill, being quite shocked and having a local say, just go back to the way it used to be, Kate. And there came the thought of candles. The pub opened in 1753, obviously way before light bulbs and such things. So that's where the ideas come from.
Has it actually saved you any money?
Yes. I mean, we haven't had our billing yet. We've only done 2 Mondays. We haven't had this month's electricity bill, but working it out, we think we're going to be saving about 3 to 4% on our electricity bill.
That's quite a lot. And how, in the longer term, how difficult and how challenging has the business environment been with those rising energy costs?
It's put a strain on the business. We've had to explore different avenues of things, to what we can do to generate more footfall, especially in the winter months. That's where the candlelight is helping. Been well received. But, we've gone from 3 ovens in the kitchen down to 1 oven, which is obviously a big consumption area for us. There's nothing we can do with the cellar, so we've just got to carry on with that and absorb the cost.
Yeah, there are some costs you just can't change. Are there other things you are doing, though? Is it kind of increasing prices? Is it, reducing some more expensive items from your menu?
Yeah, we've done other things. So we've had people in and adjusted their thermostats, make sure they're running and turn them down a few degrees to save a bit more money on them. Low traffic areas have got PRR sensors on now, so lights ain't always on where they don't need to be. And yeah, we are looking at the menu at the minute, the winter menu, and cutting down drastically on what we do have on our large menu.
I think that you've got this similar level of footfall, because obviously everybody's looking to save, and going out to eat and drink is one of the first things that people think, right now we just can't do it.
Yes, footfall this time of year is, you're pleased to pick up a few tables here and there. Bookings are a lot different now than the summertime. But with the candle night, we've doubled our footfall, so it's obviously working and people love it. So we'll keep on doing it.
Just before we let you go, I'm really interested to know, during the summer, during the seasonal months, more people are holidaying in the UK than going abroad. Have you noticed that in your pub in the summer?
I would say, yeah, we have. I would say this summer hasn't been the best. We talked to other pub owners in the area, and it's been very up and down. When we had the breaks during COVID where they couldn't travel abroad, it was a lot busier, like a normal summer for us. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And it's really good to hear that sort of your novel strategy to try and deal with the cost of electricity has actually brought more people in to come and have a look. Thank you so much for chatting to us, Katie and Alan. And if anyone wants to visit, it's the Mason's Arms in Cornwall. It sounds absolutely brilliant. And Paul, it's just reminding me, just as we were hearing that energy announcement from Liz Truss, we'll all remember that now, of course, dramatic day, the 9th of September, when, as Liz was explaining the policies, that note was being passed around Parliament, and sort of all of the kind of legislation that we were expecting desperately for energy bills became quite rapidly overshadowed. But I went to a pub in leafy North London. It's an affluent area. And as I arrived, it was really dark, and we were going to film an interview. And I said, can we put the lights on? And he said, we are keeping everything off apart from just when the customers are here, because he said, I feel like I'm at home with my teenagers. I'm saying to my staff all the time, turn it off, because we just cannot afford to run things as we would have done. Otherwise, we'll go bust.
It's crippling, but I mean, there is some government help on the way that will start to feed through from November. I think it kicks in October. Businesses will feel it from November, and that'll last 6 months. The criticism, though, is that it's only 6 months, but the government has said it will review that help. It is 6:20. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening this morning. As we've been reflecting this hour, the Bank of England has launched a government bond buying programme as it takes emergency action to stabilise the UK's spiralling economy. The bank announced it's buying £65 billion worth of bonds to prevent borrowing costs from spiralling out of control.
Now, households are being urged to take their energy meter readings ahead of a price hike on the 1st of October. It will prevent firms from estimating usage and charging energy used before Saturday at what will then be a higher rate. So the average household energy bill will rise by 25% to a frozen £2,500.
Hurricane Ian has made landfall in southwestern Florida. The Category 4 storm brings with it winds of up to 150 miles per hour. The Governor of Florida is warning of power cuts for potentially millions and is urging people to seek shelter.
It's now 22 minutes past 6. Now, the rapper Coolio, best known for his classic 1995 song Gangsta's Paradise, has died at the age of 59.
His manager revealed the rapper was found unresponsive at a friend's house in Los Angeles.
Well, let's get the latest from our showbiz reporter, Kinsey Schofield. Thank you for talking to us. This is obviously really a difficult news. Just explain to us what some of the details are.
Well, right now it does appear to be a heart attack. Coolio was found around 4 p.m. on Wednesday afternoon by paramedics at a friend's home on the bathroom floor. There will be an autopsy and an investigation to determine what the true cause of death is. Officers say it does not look drug-related. There was no drug paraphernalia found anywhere in the home or near the rapper. It does appear to be a heart attack at this time, but we are going to wait for the autopsy results, which will take a few weeks.
Coolio, and who he is, probably best known for that song Gangsta's Paradise.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Gangsta's Paradise, 6 million copies sold worldwide. He was a Grammy winner. He talked in a podcast last year about how he had some success. But it wasn't until Gangsta's Paradise, and it wasn't until getting paired with Michelle Pfeiffer. He said, they talk about going to the next level. I went 5 levels. I was welcomed into countries that had never heard rap music before. I performed in front of people that didn't even know English. I mean, when you listen to the man reflect on his life, he truly did seem to appreciate the life he had and was proud of the work he'd done. He did get into some scuffles tabloid-wise. He was arrested for some traffic violations, and he had a loaded gun. He tried to go into LAX with a loaded gun, but he always got out of that trouble. He was never truly in trouble, and he kind of kept his head up and stayed on the right path for the most part. He has a great reputation, and a lot of people are hurting tonight.
Kinsey, thank you very much for giving us the update on a really tragic story.
Thank you.
After the break, we'll be finding out if we're heading for a twin-demic of flu and COVID as we head into winter. Before that, though, speaking of winter, here's the weather.
Hello, good morning. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a chilly start out there this morning with some low cloud and fog, but soon enough, sunshine and showers will follow. And actually, it will be a touch warmer this afternoon compared with the last few days. Low pressure is moving away. That's heading towards Denmark. Around that low, still got this cool north to northeasterly airflow, and a weather front has sunk south overnight. That's clearing the southwest first thing. Showers moving away as it clears, and a blustery wind here. Elsewhere, any early low cloud and fog clearing away. Brighter skies follow into the afternoon, and actually for many, sunny spells will prevail through the afternoon. But there will be a few more showers turning up, especially around the north and the east of England, parts of central and eastern Scotland, for example. 16 to 18 Celsius typically, so a little warmer compared with recent days. The highest temperatures expected across parts of Wales and the southwest. Any remaining showers this evening soon enough fade away, and then lengthy clear spells for much of England, Wales, eastern Scotland overnight. But for the rest of Scotland, for Northern Ireland as well, thicker cloud and an increase in the breeze during the early hours will bring outbreaks of rain to the far northwest later. That'll keep things mild, 11 or 12 Celsius here, whilst mid to low single figures are expected elsewhere under clear skies and lighter winds. And with that, we'll also see some mist and fog first thing, especially for central parts of England, perhaps the east of England as well. Some of that will stick around until mid-morning. Then high cloud pushes in, and eventually a band of heavy rain as well as strong winds, gales around exposed western coasts and hills. So a blustery and unsettled end to the day for all, with that heavy rain making things very soggy and unpleasant. Temperatures suppressed under the wet and windy weather. Saturday sees further rain or showers in many places. Windy again for the south coast. Sunday's a little calmer, mostly dry in the south, showers in the north.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's coming up to 6:30. Welcome back. Still to come on today's programme at 6:50, we'll be finding out about new research that says dogs can smell stress, anxiety and depression.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Also at 7:45, Windsor Castle reopens to the public for the first time since the Queen's death. Our royal reporter Cameron Walker will be telling us how you can see Her Majesty's final resting place.
Now, please do get in touch in all the usual ways. gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet us too @gbnews. Lots of you have been getting in touch. We spoke and heard from GB News viewer Linda, who was really defending the Conservative government. She's going to conference next week, and she said it's time for us all to take a bit more personal responsibility. And we were asking her if,
live within your means.
That is what she said, because we were talking about, does she still have faith in the Conservative Party that she supports when we look at what's happened to the reaction to the economy? Well, Paul said, we all need more personal responsibility in the current climate. Stop making it sound like it's just in the UK, it's worldwide.
Yeah, Alan, morning to you, Alan, says everyone called for a brave and bold new government when Truss became PM, and now it's been delivered in all its doom and gloom. Sick of it.
But Chris says, watching your viewer Linda, she was so correct. I'm a pensioner having to tighten my belt, but this is a world problem, not just a UK one. Well, the government are going to defend their policies, and it looks as though, and the Treasury confirmed this yesterday, that Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng are going ahead with their plan. We'll be finding out more, speaking to the government and the opposition a little bit later on in the programme. But keep your views coming in at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
It is 6:30. Tens of millions of people are being urged to get flu and COVID jabs as soon as possible as fears ramp up of a winter, what they're calling twin-demic.
Well, it's the UK Health Security Agency. They say they're braced for a resurgence of flu this year, worsened by lower levels of natural immunity that will then coincide, they say, with a new wave of coronavirus.
Well, joining us now for more is Dr Charles Levinson, chairman of private GP service Dr Call. Morning to you, Charles. First of all, how much more dangerous is this flu strain than past variants?
It's probably just a bit more dangerous, but there's a strain in Australia at the moment which is likely to come here called H3N2, which is a little bit worse than your average flu strain. And in a normal year, flu kills a few thousand people. In a bad year, we had 4 years ago, we had a bad year and it killed about 20,000 people because it was a strain that wasn't included in that year in the jab that was offered. This one is included in the jab, but it is a worse strain and it is likely to have a significant impact.
So this winter, the call really is for people to get these jabs. What advice is there for the public who, of course, don't want to get unwell?
So, I think the most important advice is to get your jab. And if you're in an at-risk group or elderly, you will be offered a jab on the NHS. If you're not, then your company may offer you one at work, and if they do, you should take it up because and you can get one privately if in quite a lot of pharmacies now. The point about it is not just that you don't want to get flu, but more importantly that the NHS just doesn't have any elasticity. So if it is designed to sort of function at peak activity level, which is not ideal because it means that then as soon as there is an increase in illness, it gets tipped over and can't cope. And it always gets tipped over by flu in the winter anyway. So what's now being dubbed the Twin-demic, flu and COVID, and a particularly bad flu year, make it inevitable that we will have problems.
Some people were worried about getting jabs, getting vaccines for COVID. Have you noticed if that's fed through into hesitancy in getting a jab for flu?
So there have been conspiracy theories about COVID jabs because it was new and because the government handled it rather clumsily and tried to mandate it, or threatened to mandate it. But we haven't had that with flu, but I think we probably do have some vaccine fatigue where people have just had enough of jabs, and we really need to overcome that because we need to take this seriously because the risk is the government panicking and putting us into another lockdown with all or social distancing measure of one sort or another, with all the terrible knock-on effects that has.
Really appreciate your time, Doctor, this morning. Thank you very much, Dr. Charles Levinson there, giving us his take on the Twin-demic. Who comes up with those words? Who? When we say they are calling it the Twin-demic, who is it?
The UK Health Security Agency. Right. After the break, we'll get lots of opinions right from behind this desk. Freddie Gray and Liz Kershaw are joining us to go through the day's papers.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England,
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio, and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Breakfast. It is 6:36. Let's bring you up to date with what is happening this morning.
A key story, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, they're under increasing pressure to defend their vision for the economy. It says the Bank of England launched emergency action yesterday to try to stabilise the UK's spiralling economy. Well, the bank's buying £65 billion worth of bonds to prevent borrowing costs spiralling out of control, to try and stave off what they described as a material risk to the UK's financial stability.
Hurricane Ian has made landfall in southwestern Florida. The Category 4 storm brings with it winds of up to 150 miles per hour. The governor of Florida is warning of power cuts for potentially millions and is urging people to seek shelter.
Sweden's Coast Guard has reported that there's a fourth gas leak now on the damaged Nord Stream pipeline. 2 of the 4 leaks are in Sweden's economic zone and the other 2 leaks are in Denmark. Well, the European Union suspects that the leaks are sabotage.
So Mo Farah has pulled out of the London Marathon this Sunday due to an injury. The four-time Olympic gold medalist hurt his right hip in training. He said he'd done everything he could to be on the start line. It would have been in what would have been his first marathon since 2019, but will not be fit enough to run.
Well, let's take a look through the day's newspapers. Joining us in the studio is Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and also broadcaster Liz Kershaw. Very good morning to both of you. Freddie, let's start with the front page of The Times. Of course, everyone's leading on the same story today. Bank spends £65 billion to avert pensions collapse. For a government that's about 3 weeks old, this is a disaster.
Well, it's doom loop. We're in the doom loop. All the papers are covering the doom loop. The Times, I think, gets at both the fact that this is a big financial story, but also a political story, because, as it says underneath the headline here, Truss rejects Tory calls to sack Kwarteng.
Before you go on a little bit, doom loop, what do we mean by that?
Well, everybody in the financial markets is talking about the fact we're in a doom loop. And what's interesting about doom loops is if you keep saying we're in a doom loop, you eventually get into a doom loop. And so the doom loop worry in the financial markets is that the gilt yields, the sort of the underwiring of the financial system, is under great stress and strain at the moment, generally, globally, but also after the mini-budget on Friday. The worry at the moment is that it's sort of metastasising and that gilts would have to be sold more and more, and this is why the Bank of England has intervened dramatically. The doom loop in politics is that the Tory party, as you may well know, seems to be sort of eating itself alive at the moment. And I was in Westminster yesterday, and sort of people started saying, apparently she's going to sack Kwarteng. And people said, she can't possibly sack Kwarteng, it's completely crazy. And then the sort of rumours just kept flying around. And the interesting thing was it was coming from Tory people, which shows that Liz Truss is starting her premiership with a great lack of faith in her own party. And that is a big worry for the Tories. It's a big worry for the government. And actually, it's quite a big worry for Britain as well.
Yeah. Liz, what do you make of all this? Because a lot of our viewers this morning seem to be saying it's a world problem, it's nothing specific here, nothing you can do about it.
Well, I thought Linda earlier was just fantastic. And, you know, I've spent this last week and 5-day weekend going around the northwest, visiting friends and family, listening to people from all different walks of life, that are, some are friends and family and some are their friends that I was introduced to, and it was absolutely fascinating. And what I'd like to congratulate British people and GB News viewers on is that they're not daft. And Linda's not daft. She's looked at what's going on worldwide. And that's what I was doing this weekend as well. You know, looking at, checking the exchange rates, for example, FTSE 100, but also looking at the financial markets around the world and exchange rates. And it's so easy, if you don't do your homework, if you don't think, wait a minute, let me be curious and look into this, to live in a bubble, just take your news and just be convinced that, you know, the UK is absolutely the pits as far as a country and the economy and our chances for the future are concerned, and it helps to do your research and get this into perspective. I mean, you know, the euro's fallen, the yen's fallen, and if the euro's not against the euro, we're not doing badly, really. It's down about 2 cents on when I was there a couple of weeks ago. I remember in the financial crash of 2008 when it was virtually on par, you know, one on £1 pound. Anyway,
what the Bank of England was saying yesterday is they had to intervene so that there wouldn't be material risk to our financial stability.
Yeah, OK. Well, bonds are very hard to get your head round, and I think everybody should do what I did yesterday and read about bonds and what they are and why they would cause this sort of problem. And it's very hard to get your head round, and I'm not going to attempt to explain it now, but please look online and find out what the bonds are. These phrases are bandied about by the media, and people don't, you know, I'm not being patronising, I don't understand what bonds are, why they're important. Do your homework, then make your own mind up.
Well, can I give myself a horrible plug?
Yeah.
I wrote a bluffer's guide
Good.
to bluffing your way through this financial crisis yesterday at The Spectator.
Help us
I recommend it for anyone who wants to
I'll
crib their
read
way
it,
through.
Freddie.
What I've been doing
Yeah,
desperately.
yeah.
Cribbing my way through gilt-yield ratios.
Exactly, yeah.
Freddie, what do you think Kwasi Kwarteng's going to do? Because him and Liz Truss are totally wedded together in this plan. When are we going to hear from him? Is it going to be any sooner than the date for this sort of next budget announcement, which is weeks away?
I think the political pressure is going to get so great they're going to have to come out and start defending it publicly. I think they are going to stick to it to a certain extent. I don't think Liz Truss is quite as sort of belligerent as some people think she is. She has turned on issues before, Brexit famously. But I think her and Kwasi have had this economic vision for a long time. They are free market radicals. And they believe that the Treasury orthodoxy, as they call it, needs to be changed. And I think they have a strong appetite to do that. The problem is, will their political collapse, which seems to already be happening, mean that they don't really get a chance to do it?
I think the MPs are very likely, the backbenchers in the Tory party, are very likely to be already turning on them and undermining them, because all they can see is, will they still have a job in 15 months' time? So they're very vulnerable to that, especially as Rishi Sunak is sitting amongst them with an axe to grind. But what I would say is, I do think that Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng had a real vision last Friday to radically change the way we view our economy and run it, to be competitive on the global stage. And the whole global finance system for the past 20 years is like one giant Ponzi scheme. It's all built on credit, it's all built on low interest rates, it's all built on, in our economy, growth. What was our growth based on? It was based on house prices and retail sales. That's not creating wealth, that's not manufacturing.
Well, let's talk about
housing. They had to do something
briefly,
about it.
and we will move on to other stories in a moment, but Freddie, it's in the FT this morning, but the Conservatives really pitched themselves as the party of home ownership. That gets really difficult now.
Well, this is where the story, again, sort of confronts politics, because, it's very hard to understand the inner workings of financial markets. But when it comes to mortgages, that is where people really start to panic. And the Tories traditionally, and for the last few years, have had a huge advantage with property owners. And that is now under threat because people's mortgages are under threat and people's ability to get a mortgage is under threat. However, the FT story today is sort of briefly good news that the mortgage lenders are going back into the market, having panicked on Tuesday night. So the Bank of England's action has sort of stabilised the market. So let's not get too gloomy about everything, because there is some good news.
And on the mortgage front, that's a very good example of creating hysteria, which can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yes, a lot of mortgage lenders withdrew products, but they didn't withdraw lending money per se for a mortgage. The products they withdrew were fixed-rate mortgages over a fixed period of time. Now, if you were going to lend me some money, and you'd said, I'll lend you 100 quid, Liz, and I'll lend it to you at 1% interest for 5 years. And then suddenly you saw that if you did go ahead with that, you're going to be out of pocket because interest rates are going up. You very wisely and prudently withdraw that offer to me. And you might say, I'll lend you the 100 quid, Liz, but the interest rate I'll charge you will be flexible. And that's all that they did. It was completely serious saying, mortgages have been withdrawn. Yes, fixed-rate mortgages were withdrawn and reevaluated, and now different products are creeping back. But the banks did not say, we're not lending any money for houses.
There were just fewer products.
Fewer products. They withdrew fixed-rate mortgage products.
It's also a global reality. I mean, interest rates in America are hitting 7% now.
Yeah, that much higher than here.
So we are going to have to catch that up. It's going to be extremely painful for people. It's going to be extremely painful for me.
I think that's where there's some criticism levelled at the Bank of England, because they didn't raise interest rates quick enough, whereas the Federal Reserve did raise them quick enough, and that's why the dollar has performed so strongly against the other currencies. And
they had the opportunity to match that 0.75 of a point rate hike that the Fed did, the Federal Reserve did last week, and they didn't do it. They just did 0.5 point. So that was a key moment.
This Daily Star front page is just the pits. Kwasi meets Britain's best banking brains. They're the people who didn't act, as Freddie said last week. And one of the things I really resent is that now the Conservative government, which has only been in power for about 3 weeks is being blamed. You know, they're the baddie, they're the bogeyman. And suddenly, Andrew Watsey and the Bank of England are being cast as the knights in shining armour to save us. They've been incompetent.
But is it just down to the Bank of England? I mean, can the government say nothing to do with us? We don't have to take responsibility for any of this.
No, of course they can't.
So which bit do they take responsibility for?
They take responsibility for what they've done. Now, that's been framed wrongly, in my opinion, by the Labour Party this week, who've absolutely OD'd on Schadenfreude. They're saying, oh, you know, it's all these tax cuts that the government have proposed. What tax cuts? They've proposed that they'll cut the 45% rate of tax for people earning over 150, for earnings over 150,000. That brings out a drop in the ocean, brings in a drop in the ocean, £2 billion a year, when we're talking about tens of billions being spent on keeping people's gas bills down. They've said that we'll reverse the national insurance, which only came in April. You know, we'll not introduce the proposed increase in corporation tax. They've made very few actual cuts, but they have said, we'll keep your domestic bills down. I don't see the Labour Party criticising that, and that is the big expenditure for which the government's going to have to borrow millions to fund.
I do think people are being a little, certainly in a lot of the tabloids, the non-Tory tabloids, are being pretty hard on Kwasi Kwarteng and sort of dismissing him as an idiot. And I think
Sun here have got Quamageddon.
Quamageddon.
I haven't heard Kwasi.
The Kwasi, the Metro had a terrible one, was it? It was like the Kwarteng.
Kwasi, was it?
Yeah. Honey, I Lost the Quids was the...
Honey, I Lost the Quids.
That was my favourite so far. But I think, you know, it's very easy to sort of dismiss him as this clown and this idiot. And he could be a very dangerous politician because he's quite radical, he's quite fearless. But he's no fool. He's an extremely intelligent man, and he's extremely well read on economic history. And so this sort of idea that the sort of, you know, these Tory idiots are in charge and the bankers are going to have to correct them and the FT will tell us what's what. I mean, it's just not entirely right.
No, well said.
Freddie, Liz, thank you very much. We'll have you back in about 40 minutes to go through some of the other stories making the headlines in the newspapers today. Right now, though, it's 10 to 7. You're with Breakfast on GB News.
Yeah, we know they can pick up on cancer, COVID and even prevent seizures. But today, new research has found that dogs can also smell stress.
There's a lot of that about right now. Dogs can sniff out anything from anxiety even to depression. Using our sweat and breath, they can also play a vital role as therapy dogs.
Let's speak to Caroline Preston, who's the CEO of Autism Dogs, a charity that trains dogs to support neurodivergent adults and children. Very good morning to you, Caroline. Just tell us a little bit more about this. It's incredible.
Well, I think everybody understands that a dog's ability to smell is far greater, far more successful than human. In actual fact, it can be anywhere between 10 and 100,000 times more effective than our own noses. And it's a very big part of the training that we do. So our charity helps to autistic children and adults that are struggling with challenges predominantly around anxiety, isolation, sometimes even leading to self-harm. And without doubt, the dogs are using a number of their senses, especially so their nose, to understand changes and lifting anxiety levels. As our body temperature lifts, which is what happens when we get anxious, we start to release more and more hormones, and those fantastic noses on the dogs start to identify that. So we very much use that along with body language changes to teach our dogs to understand that their handler is starting to get overwhelmed or in trouble.
I mean, some of the research says they could help with panic attacks. Is that they could sort of anticipate that someone might be in trouble? And how would the dog sort of respond then?
That's exactly correct, and that's part of the work that we do. As anxiety levels lift, sometimes our breathing is affected, and that can eventually lead to a panic attack. So the dogs will identify, not only through their nose, but actually through their ability to read body language is a fraction of a second. So they will smell those changes as our body biologically starts to change when we become anxious. And in doing so, it can alert them before a parent or anyone else, sometimes even the handler. So the dog will identify the change, will understand what's going on, and our dogs are trained then to intervene and intercept. So using role play, a scent rag program, our dogs will spot that the handler is starting to get overwhelmed, starting to get anxious, and they may go over to the handler and nuzzle and lick. They might lean across parts of their body that will give a soothing effect. Or some of our dogs are actually trained to identify and bring over soothing objects like a weighted blanket, a favourite toy, or ear defenders that might help reduce noise and sensitivity to things that are going on around them. All that help to intercept before even a human could that building anxiety that can lead to real problems.
I reckon all dogs can pick up on stress and anxiety in all of us, but in terms of the dogs that you train, are there certain breeds that are better than others?
For lots of different reasons, yes, there are some breeds that seem to be more successful than others. What we do know is that a dog's sense of smell can be affected by the size and length of its nose. So flat-faced breeds tend not to be the type of breeds that we will work with. We work predominantly with Labrador. They have a very empathic nature. So along with that amazing sense of smell, when they see that their handler is starting to get anxious, they're emotionally motivated to naturally get involved and to try and help. So as you can see from our content here, we use a lot of Labradors, Retrievers, larger dogs as well, that can effectively apply what we refer to as deep pressure therapy. That's where they are lying on parts of the handler's body, sometimes their whole body, or leaning up against them to initiate soothing feelings to the brain and to try and reduce that anxiety level.
Fantastic. Really appreciate you giving us that insight, Caroline. Thank you so much for talking to us this morning. Caroline Preston there from Autism Dogs.
Yeah, quite brilliant that researchers managed to engineer a situation where they could get samples of people who were stressed and they test their blood levels to see if your blood pressure went up, then got that smell and then train the dogs to identify the smell. And I'm sure that will be transformational.
Dogs are amazing.
They are for the people who really struggle in those situations. Imagine when your dog... I mean, dogs help with anxiety regardless, don't they?
Yeah, with all of us. Yeah.
But they probably prevent stress as well.
Yeah. Do you know what Eamonn, who isn't here at the moment, he's recovering from his operation. If you're watching, Eamonn, we're wishing you well, said something fantastic the other day, which was that I want to be the person that my dog thinks I am.
Oh, that is lovely. Imagine that.
I love that. That stuck with me. Anyway, it is 6:55. Stay with us because after the break we'll have more on the Bank of England. Speaking of stress, on the Bank of England's move to avert a financial crisis. First, though, the weather.
Hello, good morning. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a chilly start out there this morning with some low cloud and fog, but soon enough, sunshine and showers will follow. And actually, it will be a touch warmer this afternoon compared with the last few days. Low pressure is moving away. That's heading towards Denmark. Around that low, we've still got this cool north to northeasterly airflow, and a weather front has sunk south overnight. That's clearing the southwest first thing. Showers moving away as it clears, and a blustery wind here. Elsewhere, any early low cloud and fog clearing away. Brighter skies follow into the afternoon, and actually for many, sunny spells will prevail through the afternoon. But there will be a few more showers turning up, especially around the north and the east of England, parts of central and eastern Scotland, for example. 16 to 18 Celsius typically, so a little warmer compared with recent days. The highest temperatures expected across parts of Wales and the southwest. Any remaining showers this evening soon enough fade away, and then lengthy clear spells for much of England, Wales, eastern Scotland overnight. But for the rest of Scotland, for Northern Ireland as well, thicker cloud and an increase in the breeze during the early hours will bring outbreaks of rain to the far northwest later. That'll keep things mild, 11 or 12 Celsius here, whilst mid to low single figures are expected elsewhere under clear skies and lighter winds. And with that, we'll also see some mist and fog first thing, especially for central parts of England, perhaps the east of England as well. Some of that will stick around until mid-morning. Then high cloud pushes in and eventually a band of heavy rain as well as strong winds, gales around exposed western coasts and hills. So a blustery and unsettled end to the day for all, with that heavy rain making things very soggy and unpleasant. Temperatures suppressed under the wet and windy weather. Saturday sees further rain or showers in many places. Windy again for the south coast. Sunday's a little calmer, mostly dry in the south, showers in the north.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
The government defends its economic strategy following a £65 billion intervention by the Bank of England.
Very good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock on Thursday, the 29th of September. This is Breakfast on GB News with Paul Hawkins and Rosie Wright. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
As we've been talking about quasi-quarting, the Chancellor and Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, are under increased pressure to defend their economic plans after a £65 billion intervention by the Bank of England to protect pensions and try to avoid financial crisis.
The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has called for Parliament to be recalled so the government can address the current turmoil. He's accused the Chancellor of gambling with people's money.
A fourth leak now along the Nord Stream pipeline has reportedly been found by the Swedish Coast Guard. The US Navy has offered to help protect European energy infrastructure if needed.
And members of the public will be able to see the Queen's final resting place today when Windsor Castle reopens later. It's been closed to the public since the Queen's death on September the 8th.
Now, please keep on getting in touch in the usual way, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us too @gbnews.
But our top story this morning, pressure continuing to mount on the PM and the Chancellor after the Bank of England announced they would buy £65 billion worth of government bonds to avoid a crisis in pension funds.
We're going to look at sort of the details of it and try and unpack it all for you and the implication on the market this morning in a moment. But let's just look at how the papers have covered it on the front pages. And the Express leads on the Bank of England's bailout, calling yesterday a day of turmoil.
The Guardian says the move was made to avoid a financial crisis and references Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer's calls for Parliament to be returned.
And the Sun's front page says squeaky fund time, detailing how the Bank of England potentially rescued £1 trillion worth of British savings.
Well, yesterday, our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, spoke to the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, to get his thoughts on the fallout from the government's budget. Let's have a look.
The government has lost control of the economy. That is a self-inflicted wound. It's not some event that was uncontrollable, internationally. It's a self-inflicted wound by the government. For what? For uncosted tax breaks for those earning hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Well, joining us now to unpack all of this is the business commentator Justin Urquhart-Stewart to tell us more about what this could mean for the economy and to tell us more about the public's reaction to the mini-budget, as well as the Research Director of Public Affairs at Ipsos Mori, Kieran Pedley. Thank you very much, Kieran, both of you, for joining us. Justin, let's start with you. How's the pound doing this morning? How is sort of all that impact of yesterday settled?
Well, you can sort of smell the cordite in the air. There was obviously a big explosion, and so everything's sort of slightly in a sort of state of shock at the moment. What happens next? And the answer is we did see a bit of a recovery yesterday. So it came back up as they realised the Bank of England was in there supporting it, providing that, again, the word that has to be used the entire time, confidence. And with that confidence, we saw the pound being stronger. So I suspect that will probably, it's not going to be shooting up greatly today. There's no reason for it to go down either, because the old lady is standing there saying, no, thus far and no further, we will provide that support. They have to.
Yeah, a lot of our viewers this morning are saying this is a worldwide problem. It's happening everywhere. The dollar's strong against all the other currencies. Nothing you can do about this.
And your viewers are quite right. There are all sorts of elements all the way around the world at the same time. But we also have our own little personal ones as well to try and sort out. So when you think about what's happening, the global economy is slowing down. Oh, by the way, the global economy is still growing before we talk ourselves into disaster, and that's very easy to do in moments like this. Normally grows about 4.5% a year, currently growing about 2.5% a year, and may well get a bit weaker. But it's still growing. You could say that China's economy is not in good shape at the moment, mainly because you don't actually see the data coming out of China no one believes, but again, It's still growing. We can see America has taken action and their economy is still growing. The Eurozone has got particular problems, obviously to do with energy and things like that. So, yes, there are global issues going around. But to that, then we can add that little tincture of danger that we had from our own politicians coming out with things. Not purposely, didn't think they were going to cause this. What they probably didn't do was ask enough people to say, is this the right thing to do now? And what's the reaction going to be? Because it just so happened that these the comments coming out about the budget happened to coincide with other issues happening in the city with regard to funding of the pension market, which is really pointy-headed economic stuff. But it had a ripple effect of hitting that word again. Confidence. So that goes into interest rates, that goes onto mortgages, so it affects us all directly. And there's no easy, straightforward way out of it, other than the fact, come back to confidence, leadership to say, look, actually, we're sat down with everybody, the Bank of England, the government and any other advisory people we need to have in there. We now have a plan to work our way through it.
So what should the government have done when it announced that mini-budget? How could it have reassured the markets when it was making that announcement?
Well, one key thing is with budgets, you normally have the Office of Budget Responsibility, I forgot the title right of it, but basically it's the checkers who actually say, yes, your sums do add up, 2 + 2 and all of that, which is fine. All that does is just gives a bit more confidence that a third party's looked at this. If you don't have that, you think, what's going on here? So there were a series of things which just made people a little bit nervous. That didn't cause the problem, but it was just one of those other elements that were pushed into it. Then you've got the issues over inflation as well. And, of course, you've got the Bank of England trying to... Their task now is to control inflation. And then you have a mini-budget coming out which is pushing inflation up. And so you're sitting there saying, what's going on here, chaps? Again, didn't cause the problem, but just added to it.
Yeah.
So clear leadership now and a plan of how to manage it coordinated together.
Justin, hold right there. I'm so grateful that you're in the studio to unpack all of this for us. But let's look at sort of how it is going to be managed. Kieran Pedley is down the line for us, Public Affairs Director, Research Director at Ipsos Mori. Justin's just been talking about confidence. Normally, when we get a new Prime Minister, there is this honeymoon period, we call it, when everyone feels like everything they're doing is fantastic. It's a fresh breath of air. This hasn't been the same for Liz Truss. Do the public have confidence in her and her Chancellor?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that when Liz Truss first became Prime Minister, the jury was very much out on whether she would do a good or bad job. So our first satisfaction rating for her as Prime Minister showed that 44% of the public said they didn't know whether she was doing a good or bad job as Prime Minister. And I think that, therefore, the first sort of few weeks and months of her tenure is going to be really important in forming public opinion of what they think of her and whether or not she wins the next general election. And I think we're still in the midst of this process. We're still in the midst of this economic crisis, as it were, to see what the public actually think in the end. But certainly, when we're at a stage where Labour are ahead in the polls, you're looking for something that shows the government in control and shows that poll lead narrowing. And we haven't seen that so far.
So do you think that the way the economy is performing so far, how long? Because essentially what Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss are saying is to everyone is stick with us, stick with the plan, let's not lose our nerve. But how long can that moment last? And when will it start to have an effect on people's perception of the Tories' reputation when it comes to economic credibility?
Well, I think there's two unknowns in terms of how long that can last. One is what actually happens in the markets and in the economy. So I think if things were to start getting worse and worse and worse, then clearly that's unsustainable. I'm not an economist, I'm not here to pass judgment on that, but so I think there's a real world reality that will determine how long some of this strategy can last. But also there's a political question about the political will and the unity of the Conservative Party in Parliament. Because, I mean, don't forget that actually the Conservative MPs preferred Rishi Sunak to Liz Truss in the final rounds of voting as Prime Minister. And he was quite critical of some of the plans that Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng were going to bring to bear. So I think really, in terms of how long this process lasts and how it goes, it really does depend on how the economy progresses, but also how united the Conservative Party are behind Liz Truss. And I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Kieran, thank you so much. Still in the studio with us now is Justin. Paul's just talked about timelines. What do you anticipate happening this week and the week after as markets try to steady?
Right, well, I suspect it would be nice to find out where the Prime Minister's gone. I know she's off doing a tour.
She's actually doing some local media interviews this morning.
Local radio. She's appearing on this morning, but she's not doing any national media.
Right. Well, I'm sure BBC Radio Shropshire is a riveting listen at all times, but it's not giving us a national picture as to what's going on. No, quite right. She should be out there on the doorsteps, actually telling as many people as possible, have confidence, we know what we are doing. So that's fine, but she needs to get together all the people involved in this, and as we say with this Bank of England, actually also the opposition as well. Here's the time when you actually need to bring in other people and say, we've agreed a way forward on this. Unfortunately, she's tend to have been much more sort of, I'm shock and awe, dynamic Tory leader going back to Tory bedrock stuff, cutting taxes and all of that. To row back on some of that and saying, actually, we're bringing everybody else in at the moment, sounds as though you're giving up. No, I think it should be put over as actually, we're going to make sure we're all together and create that level of confidence. Get that right. That's a help. The other issue you've got to do, which was addressed to an extent in the mini-budget, was regard to the primary employer in this country, which is actually small businesses, to make sure they've got confidence. Because small businesses are run by quite often individual people who've got their house on the line, all those issues. And so to make sure they get going, if they find themselves not covered properly with the energy issue, and they've got a cap to it at the moment, we need to see the detail how that's actually going to work. But again, that's not the confidence out of them. And small businesses, we're really good at setting them up. And we do more than France and Germany. We're very entrepreneurial. So if you can do just those two things, that's a good start. After that, what's the primary driver for the British economy? It's the consumer, you and me, and our biggest asset, which is probably our house. And so if you're actually seeing house prices start to wobble, maybe even go down in key areas, then that affects everybody. It's not so much that your house has gone down, it's just you're aware of what's happening around and about. You like to know that your primary asset is still worth something.
Just very quickly, can they wait until November the 23rd? Can Kwasi Kwarteng wait until November the 23rd to publish his medium-length plan
He can come up with more details then, but in the meantime, he's got to be reacting right now. Again, don't make it knee-jerk and frighten everybody. Just sort of sit down and say, look, this is actually what my plan we're going to be doing. In November, I'll give you more details. But I would, if I were him...
With forecasts?
I'm just coming out with some... And again, you can't be precise with them.
No.
But give an idea that we are in control. We know what's going on. The Bank of England's got bags of experience here, and we need to make sure we've got that confidence. Now, one issue we saw yesterday was the IMF, and people are very critical of the IMF because they gave lots of forecasts which are usually wrong. But on the other hand, IMF is well regarded around the world. It helps emerging markets or economies when they're in trouble. We're not an emerging market. And so, again, internationally, we look a bit embarrassed. So we need external people to be buying our bonds. And we've never, as a country, defaulted on our debt. We're highly reliable. Most other leading nations have at some stage. Even some of the states in America have done it. But what they're saying is, yeah, OK, I'll trust you, I'll lend you some money, but the cost of it's going to go up. And that's another issue to look at, which we should be aware of, is how much this debt costs us every single year. 2 or 3 years ago, it's about 50 billion, which is a lot of money. That's the same as the defence budget. What the defence budget used to be, that's grown as well. Now, this year, it's probably going to be 100 billion. To put that in perspective, that's the entire educational budget for the United Kingdom. So that you've got to watch.
Yeah. Justin, thank you.
Brilliant. And for Kieran earlier as well, thank you very much. Now, we want to really hear from you. How's this impacting your confidence, maybe your mortgage, maybe your bills? Joining us now is one of our viewers and listeners, Nigel Reid from Belfast. Nigel, a very good morning. How are you feeling? I know that your sort of trade is carpet fitting, and that's often in the sort of hospitality sector. How is what's happening to the economy impacting your livelihood?
At the moment, I'm still quite busy, but I've worry about the future. I've been speaking to some contacts over this past couple of days. The worry I have is the ordinary family with a couple of kids at school and just paid for school uniforms. Their mortgage has gone up. They don't know what their heating bills are going to be. Maybe they're able to go out on a Friday night, get a taxi into town, a meal, cinema, bottle of wine, home again. I don't think they're going to be able to do that, or even if they think they have the money, they may just say, we'll put the money away for a rainy day. And that's going to have a big impact on hotels, restaurants and bars. So that's the worry I would have.
Yeah. Are you not reassured by the government's help when it comes to freezing household bills for 2 years?
Well, we're in Northern Ireland, so we're nearly not sure what's going on. So most of our heating is oil, and apparently we're getting £100. I don't know. So,
Mate, what do you make of Liz?
Until Storm gets sorted, we don't know. Yeah.
We're battling with your line a little bit, particularly if you're on the radio, but just do bear with us. Nigel, what do you make of our new Prime Minister? Just a few weeks in, not even a month in power. Do you think she needs a little bit more slack, or is this a disaster so far?
I know she's had a baptism of fire, but I think she should be more open, and we should see it. During the pandemic, the Prime Minister was on most days. I think she should be making more comments and trying to reassure people, because a lot of uncertainty out there and people are actually worried and they don't know where they're going. That's the thing,
Really good to talk to you, Nigel. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Really appreciate it. If you want to react to what Nigel had to say there, if you want to let us know your concerns or worries financially or not, as the case may be, a lot of you getting in touch with us this morning saying it's just a case that people need to tighten their belts, then do let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk or drop us a tweet at gbnews.
Right, now it's 7:15. Let's bring you up to date with the stories of the day, and of course the main one. The Bank of England has launched a government bond buying programme as it takes emergency action to stabilise the UK's economy. The bank announced it's buying £65 billion worth of bonds to prevent borrowing costs from spiralling out of control.
Households are being urged to take their energy meter readings ahead of a price hike on the 1st of October. It will prevent firms from estimating usage and charging energy used before Saturday at a higher rate. The energy regulator Ofgem will raise the price cap to £3,549 from October the 1st.
Hurricane Ian has made landfall in southwestern Florida. The Category 4 storm brings with it winds of up to 150 miles per hour. The governor of Florida is warning of power cuts for potentially millions and is urging people to seek shelter. Earlier on in the programme, we spoke to a pub in Cornwall. They're doing candlelit nights now on a Monday evening, and they said they've done that because the electricity charges are just absolutely skyrocketing, but also it's proved really popular. People have enjoyed coming for the kind of novelty of the experience, which sounds awful that they...
And they're saying it takes the pub back to 17, whatever it was, hundreds of years ago when the pub was first opened.
Well, Sarah's got in touch. Very good morning to you, Sarah. We had a pub a few years ago. We used to have regular power cut nights when we turn out the lights and we'd use oil lamps and a few candles, and it really did create a lovely atmosphere. Anything that might increase footfall at the moment might be a good thing. I wonder what other pubs might be doing differently to encourage people through the door.
Yeah, if you own a pub, do let us know how you're managing the situation, not just to cope with energy price rises, but also just offer something a bit different, you know, to get people through the door, as it were. GBviews at gbnews.uk.
Now, let's look at what's happening with Nord Stream and this gas pipeline. The Swedish Coast Guard has reportedly found a fourth leak now along the pipeline, leaking gas into the Baltic Sea.
Comes as the US Navy offers its support to protect European energy infrastructure if needed.
Well, for more on this and other developments around the war in Ukraine, joining us now is Con Coughlin, Defence and Foreign Affairs Editor for the Daily Telegraph. Thank you very much for joining us. Just explain, what do you think is happening with this pipeline? We've had the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and NATO saying this is sabotage, but it's very complicated to actually investigate.
It certainly is, particularly as there's still gas spewing out of the pipeline into the Baltic Sea. So I fear it will be some time before we have a proper examination of the pipeline to see precisely the cause of this. But, I mean, everybody's pointing the finger of suspicion at Moscow, at Vladimir Putin. The Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, has made it quite clear that this is straight out of the Russian playbook to intimidate Europe into dropping its support for Ukraine, because if it continues supporting Ukraine, then the lights will go out. I mean, it's just classic bully boy tactics by Vladimir Putin. So that's how it looks. And of course, if that is what's happened, then we have to look at how we prevent further attacks on our energy infrastructure. Because earlier this week, Poland opened a new pipeline to Norway. Previously, Poland relied on Russia for its gas, is now getting its gas from Norway. So, question, would the Russians dare to blow up this new pipeline to deprive Poland, which is one of the more vociferous opponents of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and turn their lights out? So, there are a lot of security implications around this incident.
Con, one of our viewers has been in touch with us this morning, David. Morning to you, David, who says, why would Putin blow up Russia's pipeline when he can just turn off the gas?
Well, quite. But I mean, when you're dealing with Putin, you try and apply rationality. If Putin was rational, he wouldn't have invaded Ukraine. And David's quite right. He could just turn off the gas, which is what he's done, by the way. But this is an act of intimidation. The images of gas bubbling through the Baltic Sea. There's a kilometre wide gas spill, if that's the right word, in the Baltic Sea. I mean, this sends a very bleak message to Europe and the outside world that the Russians have the capability to do this kind of thing. Of course, we have to couch this with an allegation, because we just don't know what happened. And of course, we could all look very silly if it's just a technical fault that's happened. But it seems very unlikely at this point.
We're saying categorically, they say this is sabotage. They also say if they can conclude that, they will respond with the strongest possible terms. When we look at language like that, what do they actually mean?
Well, I think at the moment we're talking about more sanctions, more isolation. I mean, I suppose the upside of what is going on over Ukraine is that however Putin looked at it, he's losing. He's losing the war in Ukraine. Overnight we've had reports the Ukrainian forces have made more advances in Luhansk, which completely undermines Putin's attempts to annex the territory. He can't annex territory he doesn't hold. And he's also losing the economic war. He's trying to hide it, but the Russian economy is becoming a basket case. And the more aggressive he is towards the West, the more the West will react and isolate Russia to the point where they can't sell their gas and oil at proper market rates to the outside world. And that will bankrupt the Russian economy.
Expectation, Con, just finally, is that tomorrow Russia will announce sort of formal annexation of 15% of Ukraine's territory. What does the West do then?
Well, hopefully ignore it. I mean, the West has condemned this. The United Nations has condemned this as a sham exercise. And we've seen the images over the weekend of people being taken at gunpoint to the ballot boxes. So the result of this so-called referendum, or referendums, plural, was not in dispute before it happened. But this is, again, is an act of desperation by Putin. If he could hold these territories with the security forces, he wouldn't need to have the referendums. Because he can't trust the security and military, and a lot of them have just run away, then he has to have these sham referendums, and he says that this will tie them to Russia permanently. But nobody beyond Moscow, or perhaps even Belarus, actually believes this. So I hope that the West does not be intimidated by this and carries on supporting Ukraine, because the best way out of this is military victory for Ukraine.
You're not worried that Putin may frame it as an attack then on Russian sovereign territory from their point of view, and then he uses that as a pretext to using tactical nuclear weapons?
Well, that's what he said. Am I worried about it? Not particularly. I think it's an elaborate game of bluff. And I think he's been made well aware by Washington and others that if he starts playing around with tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine, the consequences are going to be catastrophic for Russia. So, again, we have to see this, in my view, as an act of desperation by the Russian leader, and we shouldn't back off.
Really appreciate your time, Con. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Con Cochran there from the Daily Telegraph.
Right now it's 24 minutes past 7. Coming up here on Breakfast, we're going to have all the sports news as Mo Farah bows out of the London Marathon that's taking place this weekend because he's injured. All of that after the weather.
Hello, good morning. I'm Eamonn McGivern from the Met Office. It's a chilly start out there this morning with some low cloud and fog, but soon enough, sunshine and showers will follow. And actually, it will be a touch warmer this afternoon compared with the last few days. Low pressure is moving away. That's heading towards Denmark. Around that low, we've still got this cool north to northeasterly airflow, and a weather front has sunk south overnight. That's clearing the southwest first thing. Showers moving away as it clears, and a blustery wind here. Elsewhere, any early low cloud and fog clearing away. Brighter skies follow into the afternoon, and actually for many, sunny spells will prevail through the afternoon. But there will be a few more showers turning up, especially around the north and the east of England, parts of central and eastern Scotland, for example. 16 to 18 Celsius typically, so a little warmer compared with recent days. The highest temperatures expected across parts of Wales and the southwest. Any remaining showers this evening soon enough fade away, and then lengthy clear spells for much of England, Wales, eastern Scotland overnight. But for the rest of Scotland, for Northern Ireland as well, thicker cloud and an increase in the breeze during the early hours will bring outbreaks of rain to the far northwest later. That'll keep things mild, 11 or 12 Celsius here, whilst mid to low single figures are expected elsewhere under clear skies and lighter winds. And with that, we'll also see some mist and fog first thing, especially for central parts of England, perhaps the east of England as well. Some of that will stick around until mid-morning. Then high cloud pushes in, and eventually a band of heavy rain as well as strong winds, gales around exposed western coasts and hills. So a blustery and unsettled end to the day for all, with that heavy rain making things very soggy and unpleasant. Temperatures suppressed under the wet and windy weather. Saturday sees further rain or showers in many places. So windy again for the south coast. Sunday's a little calmer, mostly dry in the south, showers in the north.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's coming up to 7:30. You're here with breakfast on GB News. Let's just give you a quick overview of what's to come on today's programme. And in about 15 minutes, Windsor Castle reopens to the public today. We'll be finding out at 7:45 how you can see the Queen's final resting place.
And then at 8:45, we'll ask the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Chris Philp, if the government is in control of the economy and if Parliament should be recalled. If you've got any questions for him, by the way, for the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, drop us a line, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can drop us a tweet at GB News.
Well, let's turn our attention to the world of sport. Aidan McGee joins us now to discuss and pick through the latest sports stories. Kit first up. Let's explain why this is important. Denmark's kit for, of course, the upcoming World Cup.
Yeah, so the Danish Football Association have a close association with, also a close link with Hummel. That's the national sports supplier. They had a period of maybe 4 or 5 years where it was Adidas who were making the kit, but it's a long-standing partnership, and they've got together and decided that, as of yesterday, Denmark are going to wear a kit. They're going to wear plain kits where Hummel aren't visible, and neither are the Danish is a Danish badge. So it's visible, but it's blurred out. It's kind of it's not as resplendent as it would be normally. Now, this is really interesting because it's the first time we've seen a manufacturer or even an association put their head above the parapet and saying we're not happy with what's been going on in Qatar. So they're not necessarily talking about discrimination in this case. Their beef is the treatment of migrant workers. DBU, which is the Danish Football Association, have done their own research, which they believe that around about 3,000 migrant workers have been killed since the last World Cup, I think it is. Qatar dispute that and say it's only 37. So
that's quite a big discrepancy in figures there.
A little bit, yeah, it is. So if you actually see the kit, it's just kind of, you can still see the badge, you can still see the Hummel. So the critics are saying, or the cynics are saying, well, actually, isn't this just a big marketing ploy?
That was going to be my next question, because if they were really serious, they'd take their name off altogether.
I would completely agree with you, exactly. And so, having said that, generally speaking, I couldn't see Nike doing this, for example. I mean, you know, we've seen lots of football associations around the world, and manufacturers and big organisations prefer gestures. I suppose this falls into that category, but it's the first time we've seen actually someone say something negative against Qatar when, to be honest, this World Cup was awarded 12 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, we've had plenty of time. It's not as if it was like sprung on us as an emergency award.
Yeah.
It was 12 years this has been happening. It should have happened around about 2015 when Sepp Blatter, who's widely perceived to be the guy who made this happen, he left office in 2015. They've even had 7 years since that to actually come away from Qatar. We're having a World Cup in an area the size of Yorkshire. It doesn't seem plausible. But now, in the build-up to this tournament, you'll see the politics start to kick in. I wonder if any other companies will step in and do something similar. What's interesting is that the away kit's exactly the same, so it's all white, and they've introduced a black kit as a third kit, and it's going to be known as the kit of mourning, to mourn the death of...
Really?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Kit of mourning?
Kit of mourning, yeah, they're going to call it, yeah, they've called it that.
Wow.
So you can't, again, it's not really visible. It's difficult to see the logos. Hummel has said we don't want to be visible at this tournament. As Rosie said, if they don't want to be visible, maybe take the whole thing off. That's been done before.
Yeah.
But
they are going further than other kit manufacturers like Nike.
Well, nobody's done anything. No one's done anything.
Adidas.
So yeah, they've definitely gone further. But also, so you're not allowed sponsorship, conventional sponsorship on a shirt sponsorship at World Cups, international football, or FIFA prohibits that. But you can have it on your training kit. So the sponsors have actually pulled out and said we're not going to put our names on it. We're going to keep it clear for political messaging, which brings us into the realm of gestures again, doesn't it? I mean, who knows what we're going to see on that? So it is kind of muddy waters, and I think that sport should do more to keep itself out of politics. Once you've decided to play there, you should really just concentrate on the football, in my view. But having said that, it is interesting that they've actually put their head above the parapet.
It's going to be a very different World Cup.
It's going to be very different, yeah. I mean, I don't think the temperature, everyone's talking about the temperature, but that's not going to be a massive problem because the stadiums are quite temperate, and the technology has been around to reduce the temperatures for a number of years now.
It's about the culture of the country it's taking place in.
You're going to see some arrests of supporters, and the sentences are going to be inordinate to the actual crime.
And how long to go till the World Cup?
We've got 6.5 weeks now.
6.5 weeks, not long, is it?
It's November the 18th. I think England kick off against Iran, but it starts a couple of days before that. But yeah, interesting. The kits are quite plain, and I wonder if anybody. I think a lot of our companies.
There is. We've got a picture of the kit there.
For the benefit of our radio viewers, you can see the black one on the left. That's the kit of mourning. And then I don't know if they're actually going to wear that because, I mean, for all I know, Denmark could be out in the first round. They only played 3 games, not get to wear it. But but on the right, you can still. I mean, you can still see that it's
kind of faded.
It's faded, yeah. I mean, you can still see it. I mean, you could say, well, actually, Hummel are missing out on. Oh, that's the other thing. Hummel make kits for teams in Qatar. So someone would say, well, hang on a minute, well, you're making kits for teams, club sides in Qatar. You can't feel that strongly about this.
Interesting.
We'll see. Let's move on, if we can. This Sunday, the London Marathon, at a different time of year than we normally expect. Yeah. It's normally in April. This is still a post-pandemic thing where it's in October. Lots of people lining the streets to go and watch. Would have been really excited to see Mo Farah not taking part.
No, that's right. He's not been involved since 2019. He issued a statement yesterday saying that he's tried everything he possibly can to get himself fit for this. He was really optimistic, but it hasn't proved successful, the rehab, or that he basically had some tightness in his hip and he hasn't been able to shake it off. However, he does believe he can come back for next year. It's going to be September, I think, next year, or maybe it's going to be reverted to earlier in the year. We're awaiting a decision on that. But he's going to be 40 next year. But he won the big half earlier in the year, so it's not a question of his lacking his ability to, or lacking his belief that he can do it. I still think he can be the Roger Federer of marathon running. But yeah, there's every reason to think he'll be back next year, but it's just come too soon for him, unfortunately.
Yeah, and just very quickly, England against Pakistan in the 5th T20. Is that today or was that yesterday?
No, it was yesterday.
How'd they get on?
Yeah, not very well. I mean, they were chasing just 146, and again, Paul, it's the batting. We've seen batting problems in not so much this year since the turnaround, but this was the problem before last Christmas, before the Ashes, and but they only had 146 to chase in Lahore, and they completely flunked.
So yeah, it's a 7-match series, I think.
Yes, it is, but they're as I say, they're behind now, and they've made it very difficult themselves.
OK, great. Thanks, Aidan.
Nice to see you.
Thank you very much. Aidan McGee there. It is 7:34. After the break, we'll be going through the papers with Freddie Gray and Liz Kershaw. Stand by.
We are GB News. And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel. Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. 7:37 here on Breakfast on GB News. Let's have a bit of a rifle through the papers. Joining us this morning again is Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and also broadcaster Liz Kershaw to do just that. Liz, let's start with you if you can and look into the Telegraph. Toppling statues. The headline is "Human Rights is no excuse for toppling statues." Explain to us what's happened.
Well, you'll remember in Bristol the statue of Edward Colston, the slave trader, was toppled by protesters after the Black Lives Matter movement really kicked in, and the 4 main protagonists were taken to court and were acquitted of criminal damage, and their defence was that human rights had been violated and it was a justifiable action. And the new Attorney General Suella Braverman said, "I'm worried about this because it sets a precedent for people to use violent behaviour and commit criminal damage and use human rights as a defence, and included in that would be people who glue themselves to the M25 and disrupt our lives with violent, disruptive protests." So she asked the Court of Appeal to look into the Colston statue incident, and 3 of the top lawyers in Britain have ruled that it's not a defence to say your human rights were violated by the presence of a statue, therefore you can destroy it. So now then, if you cause damage less than £5,000 in value, you'll go to a magistrate's court, and it's slightly different. It's in that case, it's to do with the proportionality of the conviction depends on how much material damage you've really caused. Anyway, I think it's a good thing. I don't think people should just be able to go around putting in windows and...
I agree entirely. I mean, did you remember there was sort of open season on statues after the Colston statue came down? Yeah. I remember Abraham Lincoln was targeted. And
Winston Churchill.
He did civil rights. Churchill got completely done. And actually, you can still see it if you look closely. It hasn't been scrubbed off entirely, all the graffiti. So, yeah, I think it's I mean, damaging public property is obviously not a good thing. And, there are obviously times when statues being pulled down is a time to be celebrated. You think of Saddam Hussein's statue coming down. But it should not be open season on anything you find you don't like in the public space.
Yeah.
Just linked to that on the subject of statues, as an aside, there was a suggestion that the 4th plinth in Trafalgar Square should now house a statue of Queen Elizabeth II, and Sadiq Khan's ruled that out.
They use that 4th plinth, don't they, for contemporary modern art, and they've said, we're going to keep it to do that rather than do the statue of the Queen.
Yeah. Is there going to be a statue of the Queen anyway? Do we know?
I don't know. I think there should be.
We can ask.
Yeah. I think it's a good bet. It's a good bet.
I'm sure there will be one. We're going to be checking in with our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, in Windsor in about 10 minutes' time, so we'll ask him. Yeah. Let's move on to politics if we can. And The Sun, page 2, Freddie, a racism row, the Labour Party conference that could have really capitalised all of the conversation. It hasn't quite.
Yes, I think Labour are very angry about this because it's been such a good week for them otherwise. I mean, Tory chaos, their conference went very well, Keir Starmer's speech went down very well, but it was undermined by Rupa Huq saying that, Kwasi Kwarteng was...
Significantly undermined.
Significantly undermined, that Kwasi Kwarteng is superficially black, which of course is a very silly and actually racist thing to say. And I think it does... I mean, Rupa Huq is quite a eccentric personality. She's been suspended now, and probably her political career might be over. I was once next to Rupa Huq, actually, when she did a really bad impersonation of Boris Johnson.
Right.
On Channel 4.
Are you saying that should have ended her career?
I felt at the time she should have been finished then.
Yeah.
But it was ridiculous. So she put on a really silly voice and said something very inappropriate about Boris Johnson, and it went kind of viral.
Right.
But she's an odd person. And I think her career is done now.
Yeah, speaking of impersonations of Boris Johnson, there was that new political drama that aired on
Kenneth Branagh
last night.
Yeah.
I don't know how... Did you see
I haven't seen it. Everybody says it's rubbish.
Right.
And I think it is weird now, these shows pop up very quickly, almost too quickly.
It's analysis of what happened in the government over the pandemic, which still, for some people, feels like hasn't been that far distant.
Also, there's enough drama going on in real politics. You know, you don't need the fictional stuff.
Well, this is true. Yeah. Liz, The Mirror, PM and Chancellor tax cuts. Blundered Truss, says the headline.
Yeah, well, talking about...
What do you think of that headline?
Well, I think I just brought it up as an example of... an irresponsible attitude by a national newspaper. We were discussing this earlier. We've just mentioned Boris Johnson. I mean, good grief, he's hardly called on the pavement of Downing Street and it's already being portrayed as entertainment. What this symbolises to me is that they've been able, the media, the left, the Remainers have been unable to remove the Conservative Party in power by democratic means since 2010. And they've, through campaigning against the present incumbents at number 10, the Tory leader, the Prime Minister, they've been able to remove Theresa May, they've been able to remove Boris Johnson, they've started now on removing Liz Truss, and she's only been in the job 3 weeks.
Wasn't it Conservative MPs, though, that removed those Prime Ministers?
Yes, because they're influenced by the fear that's whipped up by the media. All they can see is that they won't be re-elected in 15 months' time and they don't want to lose their jobs. And they'd stab somebody in the back to ensure that they have that continuity. So that's all, in my opinion, that's what's happening now. We got Liz Truss. They didn't like it. Yes, she didn't go before the electorate. She was elected in a perfectly legitimate way. That's in the constitution of the Conservative Party. The same thing happened with Gordon Brown. He was just shoehorned in while Labour in power. He replaced Tony Blair without an election. And he did pay the price for it when the next election came up because people didn't like it. But it just goes on. Losing Truss, mini-budget chaos, she goes missing. Actually, rather than Liz Truss popping up on every news bulletin yesterday and doing the round of all the interviews, I'd rather she was in number 10 doing a job and trying to sort it out. But just please give the woman a chance. And also, don't be disingenuous with the public. Report what's really going on in the world, not just Westminster, and let people have a more informed view. To get rid of another Prime Minister in such a short time undermines our nation, it undermines our economy, it undermines our democracy, and that's exactly what our enemies would like to see, us beating ourselves up.
That would be very unlikely, though, wouldn't it, Freddie?
What, for Liz Truss to go?
For there to be another leadership election.
Well, I mean, I do think the concern is that the Tory party are in this kind of Harry-Kiri self-destruction mode at the moment. And, I think that we could see, we could see votes of no confidence at some stage, but I don't think so. I think this is just panic stations. I agree with a lot of what Liz says. I think the problem for the Tories, though, is their messaging is quite bad at the moment, and they are letting this gloom-doom narrative win. And they're not finding a way of getting the optimism and confidence back. And every time they do, something...
Should Liz Truss be going... Should she have come out sooner in the week than she has today? And should she be speaking to the country as opposed to local media? Nothing... And I'm not saying being disparaging about local journalism, nothing like that. Just the platform for the country's leader. I
think you could make the case she should have come out yesterday. I think they may be thinking that their party conference is next week. She can, come out and
it's just reassurance.
I think that, I mean, it's possible that Kwasi or Liz should have come out yesterday and made a statement. But I think the idea is get to conference, big speech at conference, and do it there. She's not the best public performer, but she she's not quite as bad as other people think.
Let's look at the rest of her cabinet in the Express, page 6, Freddie. They're talking about the urging from Kemi to US giants to invest now in a low-tax UK.
Yes, funny timing for Kemi Badenoch, of course, because she would be, if there were to be another leadership challenge, she would be the front
She'd have
runner.
her hand up, she would.
But she's been sent to America to say, invest in Britain, we are now a low-tax growth economy. And the relationship between Liz Truss and Kemi Badenoch is quite interesting. I mean, there's lots of stories about what jobs Kemi was offered, what she turned down. So there's a bit of jockeying going on there. But an interesting time for her to have to go to America and say Britain's a great place to invest at this particular moment. But of course, Americans will like that message because in America they have a low-tax economy anyway. So she may be selling something Americans want to buy.
Yeah. Maybe saying it's in the long term.
It's in the long term, and look how strong your dollar is against our pound.
Yeah.
Which means our exports to them
will go up.
From Jaguar Land Rovers to whiskey are more attractive.
Yeah, exports are cheaper, but imports are more expensive.
Yeah.
Let's look at a totally different story in the Telegraph, Liz, if we can. Page 7. Ooh la la, who needs masculine and feminine to learn French?
When all this gender politics started, you know, what's your pronoun, etc., I thought, crikey, you know, you're in trouble in France, aren't you? Because we don't have masculine and feminine nouns in the English language. But everything in French is la or le, and it's the bane of my life.
That used to drive me nuts.
I can speak French, I can read French, but I have to really think hard about whether it's masculine or feminine. And it's not always obvious. I can't remember any examples now, but there are some things, even parts of the body, that you would think are masculine and they're feminine, or vice versa. So it's a minefield.
And
anyway,
random objects as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like table.
Yeah. And there's now a gender-neutral French language app to promote diversity and inclusion from Babel, and it's produced new policies on the teaching of grammar and vocabulary to be more inclusive of racial, sexual and gender identities. For instance, in French, where the suffix E, letter E, on the end of a word typically denotes feminine words, Babel is using a punctuation mark called an interpunct to show both masculine and feminine versions of the word, make it more inclusive.
I think it's a cop-out.
Yeah, you're off to France soon, aren't you?
My mother's French, so but even I struggle with the masculine and feminines. But I think it's a cop-out from the app because it's actually quite difficult for these very high-tech platforms to get the feminine, masculine distinguishments.
Yeah.
And so just making it all gender-neutral is quite easy for them, but it's obviously...
Does that make it easier to learn the language, though, actually, if there's, you know, irrespective of what you think, doesn't it?
Well,
you don't have to worry then.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
So it would be if there weren't declensions and, you know, general grammar. The other thing about it is, you know, the French have been so protective about their culture, more so than us, and non-Americanisation of things. And we don't want English words, we want French words, etc. And I've got a friend who lives in Provence, and he has a fine collection of wines. He reads the Telegraph. He's French, and you know, he's apparently completely unacceptable now. So in this new language learning kit, a scenario in which a French white man with a typical name like Pierre drinks champagne at high-end cafes is now no longer acceptable. But people like that live and breathe there.
Do. I lived in France for 2 years, and I was there actually when the pandemic broke out, and there was a huge row as to whether COVID should be la. I can't even remember now who won that side of the argument. But,
moving on, Freddie, this headline, first cloned wolf is born via a beagle, is not in the Daily Star.
No, it's not. I just want to read out the first sentence of the Times because it's so surreal. 100 days ago, Maya the Arctic wolf emerged from the womb of a beagle.
So a dog,
sort of poetic, isn't it?
A beagle's given birth to a wolf.
To a dog, and it not only and it's cloned from a cell, so it's not even conceived in any traditional.
It's not a wolf in beagle's clothing.
It's not a wolf in beagle's clothing. I mean, this is the brave new world we are entering into. where people won't necessarily need parents, they can just be harvested. It's all rather terrifying and alarming, but exciting for the scientists who are doing it.
Yeah, and fixing the labour market, potentially.
And fixing the labour market.
You could bring back the woolly mammoth, they were saying, weren't they?
Yes.
I suppose you'd have to have a big enough host.
Yes.
For the...
We've all seen Jurassic Park. We know where this goes.
But I was thinking years ago...
What were you thinking, Liz?
If somebody you love died, which they had done on me just then, and I was very upset about it, could you take a cell before, you know, they were cremated or buried, and then recreate that human being? And it's science, it's like a science fiction
It's
novel.
like the human version of Jurassic Park, right? You wait till the science is around. Yeah.
Well, you can recreate somebody. I mean, people go to the Far East now. They do recreate their puppies, don't they? Their dogs. But could you recreate in the future? Big ethical thing. A person, and by bringing that biological entity up in similar environmental conditions, because it is nature and nurture, could you recreate that same human being?
What a note to end the paper review on. Liz, thank you very much.
Liz,
Freddie.
We need that paper. Can you write that paper for us?
Oh, it's a novel.
Yeah, it's a novel.
Yeah.
OK, I'm looking forward to that.
There we go.
You could have two Liz's on. You could have Liz on either side.
No,
Liz v Liz.
No, you couldn't. No, I'm not talking about recreating oneself. I'm talking about like people replace their pets now. In the future, could we replace our relative?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there we go.
GB Views at gbnews.uk if you want to feed back to us on that one, Liz. Thank you. Thank you as well to Freddie. We'll have more from them in the next hour. In the meantime, should we go to Windsor Castle?
Yes, it's going to welcome back the public for the first time since the Queen's death. The castle's going to open at 10 o'clock this morning, a couple of hours' time, allowing visitors to see the Queen's final resting place and view the ledger stone inscribed with her name in the George VI Memorial Chapel.
Yeah, let's cross live to the one and only royal reporter, Cameron Walker, who's there for us. Morning to you, Cameron. Just tell us more about what the public can expect when the castle reopens later.
Morning, Paul. Well, it was only last Monday that Her Majesty's coffin was processed down the Long Walk at the other side of Windsor Castle to where I am and through those gates into the quadrangle before she was finally laid to rest in St George's Chapel. But those members of the public who had gathered by the gates were the last members of the public to see Her Majesty's coffin physically in real life. And today, the first members of the public can see the Queen's final resting place in St George's Chapel. It opens at 10 o'clock today, Windsor Castle, and Buckingham Palace at the weekend released a picture of the new ledger stone with the Queen's final resting place. She's been interred alongside her father, King George VI, the Queen Mother, as well as her husband, Prince Philip, and her sister, Princess Margaret, whose ashes are interred there. But on this new black stone slab, which is new, it's set on the floor, it inscribes the names of her mother, father and husband, as well as the Garter Star. Now, all four of them were members of the most noble order of the Garter, the oldest and most noble order of chivalry in Britain, and St George's Chapel is its spiritual home. So how do you come and visit Her Majesty's final resting place? Well, at 10 o'clock today, Windsor Castle will open its doors to the paying public. It includes entry to St George's Chapel, where the King George VI Memorial Chapel is, which is like a mini kind of annex of the main chapel where Her Majesty the Queen is interred. So that's there, and visitors can see Her Majesty's final resting place by looking into the annex of the chapel. And of course, it was only a few months ago, Paul and Rosie, that I was reporting here at Windsor Castle and at Buckingham Palace on those magnificent Platinum Jubilee displays to celebrate Her Majesty's 70 years of service. Now, the Royal Collection Trust has confirmed that those Platinum Jubilee displays here at Windsor Castle and at Buckingham Palace actually will not be reopening this year to the public. It included the coronation dress, which Her Majesty the Queen wore for her coronation in June 1953. So it's just the staterooms at Windsor Castle as well as St George's Chapel, which is behind me, but the paying public can visit from 10 o'clock today, and it's open every day apart from Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and St George's Chapel is closed to visitors on Sunday, unless of course you want to go and worship, which is open to all.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Cameron Walker there, our royal correspondent, and one would have thought the queues will be quite long for that, because obviously a lot of people didn't get to file past the coffin when it was lying in state.
Yeah, of
so
course.
This is kind of, I guess, the next best thing. And still lots to see at Windsor Castle, even without those Platinum Jubilee displays.
Now it is 4 minutes to 8. At 8 o'clock, we'll have much more for you on the Bank of England's intervention into the markets and how it could affect your pension. That's after the weather.
Hello, good morning. I'm Eamonn McGivern from the Met Office. It's a chilly start out there this morning with some low cloud and fog, but soon enough, sunshine and showers will follow. And actually, it will be a touch warmer this afternoon compared with the last few days. Low pressure is moving away. That's heading towards Denmark. Around that low, we've still got this cool north to northeasterly airflow, and a weather front has sunk south overnight. That's clearing the southwest first thing. Showers moving away as it clears, and a blustery wind here. Elsewhere, any early low cloud and fog clearing away. Brighter skies follow into the afternoon, and actually for many, sunny spells will prevail through the afternoon. But there will be a few more showers turning up, especially around the north and the east of England, parts of central and eastern Scotland, for example. 16 to 18 Celsius typically, so a little warmer compared with recent days. The highest temperatures expected across parts of Wales and the southwest. Any remaining showers this evening soon enough fade away, and then lengthy clear spells for much of England, Wales, eastern Scotland overnight. But for the rest of Scotland, for Northern Ireland as well, thicker cloud and an increase in the breeze during the early hours will bring outbreaks of rain to the far northwest later. That'll keep things mild, 11 or 12 Celsius here, whilst mid to low single figures are expected elsewhere under clear skies and lighter winds. And with that, we'll also see some mist and fog first thing, especially for central parts of England, perhaps the east of England as well. Some of that will stick around until mid-morning. Then high cloud pushes in and eventually a band of heavy rain as well as strong winds, gales around exposed western coasts and hills. So a blustery and unsettled end to the day for all, with that heavy rain making things very soggy and unpleasant. Temperatures suppressed under the wet and windy weather. Saturday sees further rain or showers in many places. So windy again for the south coast. Sunday's a little calmer, mostly dry in the south, showers in the north.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
The government defends its economic strategy following a £65 billion intervention by the Bank of England.
A very good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Thursday, the 29th of September. This is Breakfast on GB News with Paul Hawkins and me, Rosie Wright. Let's give you an overview of what's leading the news this morning.
Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss are under increased pressure to defend their economic plans after a £65 billion intervention by the Bank of England to protect pensions and avoid a financial crisis.
The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer's called for Parliament to be recalled so the government can address the current turmoil. He's accused the Chancellor of gambling with people's money.
A fourth leak along the Nord Stream pipelines has reportedly been found by the Swedish Coast Guard. US Navy has offered its support to protect European energy infrastructure if needed.
And members of the public will be able to see the Queen's final resting place today when Windsor Castle reopens at 10 o'clock. It's been closed to the public since the Queen's death on September the 8th.
Remember, you can get in touch with us this morning on anything we're talking about, particularly the economy and how the government is handling it. gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Lots of you messaging in. Good morning to Tim, who says, prior to making the recent tax cuts, I wondered if Liz Truss had gotten commitments from industry leaders and investors that they would invest given the favourable climate.
Russell, the IMF has shown it is a political organisation controlled by the left-wing EU and USA. The IMF has slated the new government for reducing the top rate of tax and not mentioned the hundreds of billions being used to support people with energy bills. In 2016, the IMF warned of catastrophe if we voted for Brexit, and they were wrong. Do not listen to them! ! Thank you, Russell. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Is catastrophe correct or too OTT? Let's give you the overview then of our top story. Pressure continues to mount on the new Prime Minister and the new Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, after the Bank of England announced they would buy £65 billion worth of government bonds to avoid a crisis in pension funds.
Yeah, let's take a look at what some of the front pages are saying about it this morning. The Express leads on the Bank of England's bailout, calling yesterday a day of turmoil.
Well, The Guardian says the move was made to avoid a financial crisis and references the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer's calls for Parliament to be recalled.
And the Sun's front page says squeaky fun time, detailing how the Bank of England potentially rescued £1 trillion of British savings.
Well, we just heard there the views of the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, who's quite buoyant, actually, having just finished the Labour Party conference. They're up in the polls. Well, our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, spoke to the Labour leader to get his thoughts on the fallout from the government's budget. Let's take a quick look.
The government has lost control of the economy. That is a self-inflicted wound. It's not some event that was uncontrollable, internationally. It's a self-inflicted wound by the government. For what? For uncosted tax breaks for those earning hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Well, we can speak now to get more reaction, I should say, from the Chief Operating Officer of the Institute of Economic Affairs, Andy Mayer, and the local government editor for Conservative Home, Harry Phibbs. Harry, we'll come to you in just a moment, but first I just want to get your economic take on what has been happening, Andy, and are you worried?
No, what we're seeing at the moment is credit where it's due. The Bank of England is doing its job. What that job here is to restore calm and stability. And what's been picked up because of the international market volatility is that there is a flaw in the structure of complex financial markets that they have intervened to address, to reassure those markets, calm everything down. I think some of the headlines on the papers are a little bit irresponsible, frankly. It was never the case that the entire pension system was going to collapse. That's just hysterical nonsense. It was the case that the way that they had tried to cover themselves against sharply rising interest rates was difficult, and some of those bets had to be structured faster than they could otherwise cope with. That's what the bank's helping them do. Otherwise, the Prime Minister is now out and about issuing reassurance and calm, which is what she needs to do after a very febrile week.
We may see some of that from Liz Truss today. She's doing a round of local media interviews that have just started, actually, at 8 o'clock. Not speaking to the national press yet. When we look at this action taken by the Bank of England yesterday, not extraordinary but unusual, who or what is to blame for them having to intervene in your mind?
Well, partly it's the Bank of England, because the other part of their job is controlling interest rates. And here, after Brexit, they were accused of acting a little bit alarmist, so they've been overcautious since. And interest rates should have gone up fast. They're going up all over the world because a lot of Western countries are in extreme amounts of debt. And if you borrow lots of money, that's the price of doing it. You have higher interest rates that then spiral out across the economy. And it's the pace at which that's been happening that's meant that the UK has been under pressure regardless of what's been happening with the government. So they're partly responsible. The government can be blamed for the communications around their budget statement. There they acted perhaps recklessly in the way they didn't use the OBR to set the mood. They didn't think about how people would react to some of the tax cuts. And I think everybody's got it wrong on the energy price guarantee. Although it's a very humane welfare measure, it's also a very expensive piece of unfunded borrowing. And that 100 to 200 billion is what people are reacting to, not the £1 to £2 billion tax cut for 45p.
Harry Phibbs from Conservative Home, do you agree with that the government maybe got its communications wrong when it came to putting out that mini budget, and doing so without a forecast kind of made the markets nervy?
I think it was necessary to get on with the tax cuts, given the circumstances, and I think that the risk of allowing people to feel that, for example, these big increases in corporation tax would have gone ahead next year. I mean, that would have been a huge risk. You talk about people talk about the risks of tax cuts, but the risk of high tax choking off growth and choking off investment was there. So I think it was necessary to make those announcements. But I think the problem now is that the markets are waiting to see if the government will be serious about delivering a tight control of public spending to keep the public finances under control, and also to deal with the supply side, lifting some of the regulatory burdens, because they might think, oh yes, well, we've heard all about cutting red tape before, and is Liz Truss really serious about it? I mean, I happen to think that she is, and that she will be delivering, and to some extent the cutting red tape and cutting public spending go hand in hand. I mean, this week, I don't know if you saw, some farmers wrote in to say we're fed up with all the bureaucracy and having to micromanage every acre with all these officials, all the quangocrats and civil servants going around telling us what to do. We want to get rid of that red tape. Well, that would also then mean we wouldn't need to be employing all those officials, and so it's an opportunity for saving in public spending. So I think that that's an example of the sort of thing Liz Truss will be receptive to, and she'll persevere.
How do you think they're going to fare next week at the party conference? There was a lot of sort of impatience, really, at the length of the leadership campaign. Then Liz Truss comes in. Then, of course, we have the death of the Queen, and it takes a long time for there to be action. We get this policy announcement from them, and it's, in many people's eyes, caused catastrophe rather than confidence. How are they going to navigate this next week?
Oh, I think that they'll be upbeat. I mean, for a lot of Conservatives who actually believe in the things Liz Truss believes in, that Margaret Thatcher used to believe in, that the way to have economic growth and wealth creation is through free enterprise. Feeling at last they've got these policies, and they believe they will work, and so they're not going to be put off by the sort of temporary speculation of the men in red braces or whatever they wear these days, because they've got confidence in it. I mean, those who are a bit more pessimistic, I think will be inclined to say, well, look, Liz Truss has won. Let's give her a chance. Let's see how it goes. So I think that the idea that there'll be a sort of U-turn, or the policies will be abandoned is nonsense. I mean, they will press ahead with them, and then they'll be judged according to the results.
Yeah, Andy, if there's no U-turn in tax cuts, then how does the government win back trust from the markets? Because the markets, as you've said, the communication wasn't great with the mini budget. There was no OBR forecast, etc. So the markets were thinking, oh, OK, we're not sure we trust then what's going on here. How do they win back that trust if they're not going to U-turn on tax cuts?
Well, they've got to look at the other side of the ledger. I mean, what Kwasi did in the mini-statement was say it's all going to be dealt with growth. And there was, to be fair, detail within the budget report that looked at how that might actually happen, with a 1% growth per year, for example. But that's not convinced the markets. And it shouldn't convince the markets because, frankly, that's Corbynomics. That's saying you can just borrow money forever and growth will happen and deal with it. So now they're looking at spending restraint. And that was always going to be something they had to do in the proper budget statement that's coming in November. And they're going to look at the parts of the state that are inefficient, ineffective, and can be reduced, while protecting those parts that are essential, which are likely to be things like defence, parts of the NHS, the education system.
Yeah, politically dangerous territory, though, Harry, if they don't if they don't, at the moment, they're not saying either way whether they're going to uprate benefits in line with inflation, which is leaving a lot of people at the vulnerable end of the income spectrum thinking, OK, am I going to be all right through the winter?
I think what they do need to make clear in terms of the communication is that giving people more incentive in terms of what you call the Laffer curve, in terms of giving people more rewards for their work, that applies to the poor as well as the rich. And in terms of the poor, it does mean looking at welfare reform and the universal credit taper and making sure that that the people are actually rewarded for taking on more work, and there's a lot of people in maybe low-paid part-time work who could get more work, but they wouldn't be getting much reward because of the loss of benefits. And also childcare. And I think it's very good that the government's looking at the childcare ratios in line with other countries that make childcare far more expensive than it needs to be. And so some of these things, look, on the supply side, some of these reforms are not. It's not just financial services, although it's very important, but it's people on regular incomes, low incomes as well. That there's potential for reforms to actually improve living standards quite significantly, I would say.
Yeah. Good to talk to both of you this morning. Thank you so much.
Harry and Andy, thank you. We mentioned Liz Truss is doing some of those interviews this morning with local media, local radio stations. One thing she's already said that we can bring to you, she said, the government had to take urgent action on fuel bills and to get the economy moving, and that means taking controversial and difficult decisions. So we'll be unpacking some of her statements, and also we'll be speaking to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury in about half an hour's time. So if you've got any questions, particularly on how the government are handling this, then let us know, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we'll put them directly to Chris Philp in about half an hour's time.
Yep, let's, at 12 minutes past 8, speak to one of our viewers, GB News viewers. Paul Harrison joins us from Turling in Essex. Paul, very good morning to you. First of all, what do you make about what's happening? Just give us your thoughts.
Frenzied hysterics. We've been through this before. We'll go through it again. What we've learnt over the past 2 years is that you can't you can't manage a nation or a government with low interest rates, ultra low interest rates, close the economy down for 2 years, and indulge in massive quantitative easing without consequences. And I'm afraid we're suffering some of the pain, serious pain, as a result of that.
What's the government's role in this? Because clearly the Bank of England have to take some responsibility. People are saying that they should have put up interest rates earlier, and we know that there are global factors at play here. But what is the government's role, and what could it have done better, if anything at all, in your opinion?
Well, they're on the back foot because when a government's elected, they've got 5 years to make a difference. I would say that to make a difference, a government has to bring in legislation in the first 2 years for it to have an effect by the time the next election comes round. Unfortunately, 3 years have been wasted, so therefore they've got to be much more proactive than they would normally wish to be. They've acted very quickly without having the luxury of being able to explain themselves, and I'm afraid the febrile environment in which they're operating doesn't understand what they're trying to do. So they need to explain themselves.
Are you saying those 3 years that were wasted, perhaps then that this is a hangover from Boris Johnson's years?
No, it's a hangover from locking the economy down for 2 years, ultra low interest rates and quantitative easing.
If we hear from the Prime Minister today, what do you want to hear her say?
I want to hear much more about targeted tax incentives. I think it's we hear a lot about young people not being able to buy houses. John Major, God rest him, was the Conservative Prime Minister that ended tax incentives for interest on mortgage interest. They should bring back a whole raft of tax incentives for young people in the 20 to 35 demographic that are taking on a mortgage, and really make it worthwhile for people to take on a mortgage and buy a house. It's in everybody's interest that there are more homeowners. Home ownership has fallen from about 75% when I was buying my first house, or when we were buying our first house, to about 60%, and that's wrong. We need to get more people owning their own home, and the 20 to 35 year demographic needs to be incentivised using targeted tax incentives to assist them.
Yeah, really good.
You could ask Chris Philp in half an hour why, with a click of a mouse, they can't do that. It's a very simple and easy way for the Treasury to target taxpayers' money to benefit the country.
Targeted tax incentives for young people. We will put that to him. Thank you very much for speaking to us, Paul. Really appreciate your time. Thank you. That's Paul Harrison, GB News viewer. And another line from Liz Truss, who's currently speaking to local radio. She was asked, can you reassure listeners that your judgment is better than that of people like the IMF and the Bank of England who have criticised the mini-budget? She said, I have to do what I believe is right for the country and what is going to help move our country forward.
It seems, at least for now, she is determined and she is wedded to Kwasi Kwarteng's plan. Many people saying Liz Truss has had this vision in the pipeline for years already, so she will not budge at this point. We're going to keep you up to date here on GB News and also try and unpack what, for some of it, is quite complex. Lots of people, particularly politicians, getting their head around the economy in a new and detailed way, but we'll try and coax you through it here on the programme. Right now, 18 minutes past 8.
Yeah, let's bring you up to date with what else is happening this morning. Households are being urged to take their energy meter readings ahead of a price hike on the 1st of October. It'll prevent firms from estimating usage and charging energy used before Saturday at a higher rate. The energy regulator Ofgem will raise the price cap to £3,549 from October the 1st, which is Saturday.
Hurricane Ian has made landfall in southwestern Florida. It's a Category 4 storm, bringing winds of up to 150 miles per hour. The governor of Florida is warning of power cuts for potentially millions and is urging people to seek shelter.
The US rapper Coolio, known for the 1990s hit song Gangsta's Paradise, has died. The song became one of the most successful rap songs of all time, winning a Grammy Award for Best Rap Solo Performance in 1996. The 59-year-old was not only famous for his music career in the UK, but also for his appearance on the reality TV show Big Brother.
Now 19 minutes past 8. The inquest into the death of Molly Russell, a 14-year-old who took her own life in 2017, is reaching its final stages at North London's Coroner's Court.
Her death sparked discussion about the dangers of social media for young people after it was discovered that she had viewed content surrounding self-harm and suicide on platforms such as Instagram.
Her family have since campaigned fiercely for tighter rules over social media content. We can go outside the court now because our London reporter Alice Porter is there for us. Alice, a very good morning to you. What's been said and what evidence has been heard at the inquest so far?
Good morning. Well, on Tuesday, the court heard from a child psychiatrist who actually viewed some of the content and images that Molly Russell had been looking at prior to her death. And he said it had left him unable to sleep properly for several weeks and that the content she was viewing would have contributed to her feeling of hopelessness and that a lot of it seemed to glamorise issues to do with self-harm and depression. Now, yesterday, the head teacher of Molly Russell's school in Harrow, she gave evidence as well and said it was almost impossible for schools to keep track of the risks posed to pupils by social media. And actually, I had a look on Instagram last night to see how easy it is to view disturbing content and quotes. And actually, I have to say, I was quite shocked. I'll read you one that I found with about 2 clicks. It says, "Nobody cares unless you're beautiful, popular, or dead." I was able to find that quite easily. Now, Instagram say that any kind of content that promotes suicide completely violates their rules and will be taken down. But this inquest certainly calls into question the algorithms that are used by social media companies in order to keep young people engaged with their content.
What have social media companies said, Alice?
Well, a senior executive for Pinterest, he gave evidence and said that the site wasn't safe when the teenager was using it, and said that some of the images she had viewed he wouldn't show to his children. But we had a slightly different tone from a senior executive with Meta. That's the company that owns Instagram. She said that images viewed by Molly Russell prior to her death were safe, although she did concede that 2 images contravened Instagram's policies and guidelines. And I think this is the real, perhaps, difficulty for social media companies, is that there is a lot of content out there that is meant to support and help people with mental health problems, and that's something which the father of Molly Russell, Ian Russell, he has said that some of it is meant to be uplifting and some of it is supportive, but there is certainly a line, and there are much more sinister content out there that encourages and glamorizes issues to do with self-harm and depression. And really, I suppose what will come down to fundamentally with this inquest into Molly Russell's death is the role that social media companies have to play in keeping young people safe, and how far the content that she was viewing contributed to her death.
GB News' Alice Porter in North London for us, and we'll keep you across that inquest here on GB News.
Right now, it's 22 minutes past 8. Coming up, we're going to be finding out how the cost of living is affecting people's personal safety at night. The new Met Police Commissioner vows to make streets safer. That's after the weather.
Hello, good morning. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a chilly start out there this morning with some low cloud and fog, but soon enough, sunshine and showers will follow. And actually, it will be a touch warmer this afternoon compared with the last few days. Low pressure is moving away. That's heading towards Denmark. Around that low, we've still got this cool north to northeasterly airflow, and a weather front has sunk south overnight. That's clearing the southwest first thing. Showers moving away as it clears, and a blustery wind here. Elsewhere, any early low cloud and fog clearing away. Brighter skies follow into the afternoon, and actually for many, sunny spells will prevail through the afternoon. But there will be a few more showers turning up, especially around the north and the east of England, parts of central and eastern Scotland, for example. 16 to 18 Celsius typically, so a little warmer compared with recent days. The highest temperatures expected across parts of Wales and the southwest. Any remaining showers this evening soon enough fade away, and then lengthy clear spells for much of England, Wales, eastern Scotland overnight. But for the rest of Scotland, for Northern Ireland as well, thicker cloud and an increase in the breeze during the early hours will bring outbreaks of rain to the far northwest later. That'll keep things mild, 11 or 12 Celsius here, whilst mid to low single figures are expected elsewhere under clear skies and lighter winds. And with that, we'll also see some mist and fog first thing, especially for central parts of England, perhaps the east of England as well. Some of that will stick around until mid-morning. Then high cloud pushes in, and eventually a band of heavy rain as well as strong winds, gales around exposed western coasts and hills. So a blustery and unsettled end to the day for all, with that heavy rain making things very soggy and unpleasant. Temperatures suppressed under the wet and windy weather. Saturday sees further rain or showers in many places. So windy again for the south coast. Sunday's a little calmer, mostly dry in the south, showers in the north.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's 27 minutes past 8. Still to come on the programme today in just 20 minutes' time. We're going to be getting the real latest on the government's plan for the economy with the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Chris Philp.
Yep, and then at 9:10, explorer Levison Wood will be here in the studio showing some of his amazing stories from time travelling the world to his days in the army tour in Afghanistan.
Please do continue to get in touch. There's quite a lot of anger actually in the GB News inbox today, particularly, well, either about what's happened to the economy or the media's handling of what's happened to the economy. All views very welcome. gbviews at gbnews.uk or tweet us too at GB News.
You know what? I'd said time travelling the world. And I was thinking, time travelling, his time, comma, travelling the world.
That would be incredible if we had a time traveller on breakfast. What a
Well, all the exclusives here on GB News Breakfast. But at 8:27, let's go back to Windsor Castle. They're going to welcome the public back for the first time since the Queen's death.
The castle opens in an hour and a half's time, allowing visitors to see the Queen's final resting place and also view the ledger stone inscribed with her name in the George VI Memorial Chapel. As you can imagine, lots of people keen to go.
Yeah, our Royal reporter Cameron Walker, in fact, is there with some of them now. Morning to you, Cameron.
Good morning, Paul. Yes, a couple of people have actually been here from very early this morning to be the first people to see Her Majesty the Queen's final resting place and that new ledger stone inscribing the names of herself, George VI, her mother, the Queen Mother, and her late husband, Prince Philip. So let me introduce you to Anne and Grace, who have been here since very early this morning. Welcome to GB News, both of you. Just tell me why you have decided, let's come to you first, Grace, to be the first person to see Her Majesty the Queen's final resting place.
It's nice to come and see her for the last time, to pay our respect, to say farewell. We were the first to see her at the Westminster, so we decided to come here and see her and say farewell to her for all what she has done for everybody, especially Commonwealth countries. And she's been a good woman, good mother, and is a mother to everybody. So that's why we were here in the morning.
And Anne, you've come from Cardiff, haven't you, all the way to Windsor? A long journey.
Well, not too bad, 2 hours really, but you know, it's nothing compared to what Her Majesty did for the country and the Commonwealth and the whole world. 70 years of, you know, unstinted loyal duty, and such a wonderful, wonderful lady, and we're very pleased to say we are first in the queue, and we'll be able to have a look at Her Majesty's headstone and reflect on everything that she did in a very sad time.
And how do you think you'll feel when you see that for the first time?
Oh, emotional.
Well, emotional.
Very tearful.
Yeah,
that's it.
really
Finality, that's it now. And the castle's empty. There's nobody living in it at all. Whereas it was a home with corgis and the Duke lived there. And they had a lovely home, a lounge, and
Well, fingers crossed it will be someone else's home very soon. Grace, Anne, thank you so much for speaking to me on GB News.
I wish Eamonn a get well message, because Mr. Holmes has got a bad back. Get well soon,
Get well,
Mr. Holmes. Bye.
Well, thank you. Great. Get well soon, Eamonn Holmes. Well, the gates open here at Windsor Castle at about 10 o'clock this morning for the paying public to see Her Majesty the Queen's final resting place.
Cameron, I just have to tell you, I met Grace on the day the Queen passed away. She was outside Buckingham Palace. She is a super fan. And when I saw that she was one of the first people in the queue, I thought, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, she was also out on Lambeth Bridge, trying to be the first person to see Her Majesty the Queen lying in state at Westminster Hall, Paul. So I think those two in particular are very much royal superfans.
Yeah, definitely. Cam, thank you so much. Cameron Walker, our royal reporter at Windsor there also. And we join in those good wishes too.
Yeah, we do.
Eamonn Holmes, who's recovering from a bad back at home, so
he's recovering. He will very much appreciate well wishes. And it's Isabel's birthday, which is why you've got Paul and Rosie instead of Isabel and Eamonn, but they will, of course, be back.
So happy birthday to Isabel. Are there any more best wishes? Anyone else?
That's true. Right, now, 8:31. We know, of course, the obvious impacts of the cost of living, how it's rising. So that's your energy bills, public sector strikes we've seen over pay and increased interest rates. There are, of course, some knock-on, less obvious consequences. And one of them, particularly from one organisation, they want to highlight the risk to women walking home alone because they won't get a cab.
Yeah, despite the new Metropolitan Police Commissioner saying he would be happy for his daughters to walk home alone in the capital, around 65% of Londoners are concerned about their personal safety at night. Joining us now
is Emma Kay, the co-founder of WalkSafe. Thank you very much for coming in. Just explain to us, why did you decide we need some kind of device that would be useful as a tool for people travelling at home alone?
Well, thank you for having me. I think it was just born off of my personal experiences. Sadly, from the age of 12 years old, I know how it feels to experience being catcalled, being followed, being groped when walking home late at night. And I think these findings, they're just so stark, and it is just a constant, urgent reminder that 1 in 5 women are constantly or currently adapting their behaviour right now and not getting taxis because they financially can't afford to, and they're walking home. And I think that it reinforces a need for an app like mine, which is free to use, has lots of safety tools that can actually help you feel and be safer.
What did you make of Mark Rowley, the new chief of the Met Police, saying that he would be happy for his daughters to walk around at night? You're shaking your head.
I am, because I think that our current research that we did with Budweiser Brewing Group shows that 81% of females think about their personal safety when they leave the house. So it does make me think, is she part of that 19% or the 81%? Because my personal experiences and those around me and ones that I've talked to have all said that actually they don't feel safe when walking home at night. And actually, another finding from our current research, that 37% of women said that if they had access to an app like ours that had the suite of tools, they would actually feel safer.
So what this app does is it allows you to send to someone that you know, a trusted contact, parent, I don't know, other half, friend, to say, this is where I am, and they can track you on your journey home. Just explain how it works.
So exactly that. So we've got our trusted circle of friends. So we always say, make sure it's people who you trust, not, you know, someone you met down the pub the other night. And you can share your journey with them. So actually 63% of women say that they actually share their journeys. And actually what our app is there to do is to take the hassle out of that. So you can actually follow someone in real time, just to ensure they get to their destination safely. And we also have an interactive crime map, which highlights where recent crime has taken place, so you can avoid those crime hotspots when you're trying to get to and from perhaps a train or home.
All right. Really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having
Emma Kay there, co-founder of WalkSafe. It is 8:34. After the break, we'll be going through the papers with Freddie Gray and Liz Kershaw. And don't forget, at 8:45, speaking to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Chris Philp. Lots to come here on GB News Breakfast.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 8:36. Let's bring you up to date with what is happening here on GB News Breakfast.
Now, Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, has publicly spoken for the first time since the criticism of Friday's mini-budget. The Prime Minister says the government had to take urgent action and that she's prepared to take controversial and difficult decisions to get the economy moving, and she's prepared to do whatever it takes to make that happen.
Hurricane Ian has made landfall in southwestern Florida. The Category 4 storm brings with it winds of up to 150 miles per hour. The governor of Florida is warning of power cuts for potentially millions and is urging people to seek shelter.
Sweden's Coast Guard have reported that there is a fourth gas leak on the damaged Nord Stream gas pipeline. 2 of the 4 leaks are in Sweden's economic zone, the other 2 are in Denmark's. The European Union suspects, or they say, they think the leaks are sabotage.
Right, let's go through the papers then. Joining us this morning is Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and broadcaster Liz Kershaw. Morning to you both. Welcome back. Freddie, let's start with you. Airline axes gendered uniform in the Telegraph.
Yeah, we were just talking about gendered language, and then Virgin, who like to see themselves at the forefront of the culture wars, have said that air stewardesses and stewards and pilots will be able to choose whether they want to wear a dress uniform or trousered uniform. I'm not really sure what I think about this, other than it doesn't really make any sense at all. I mean, I think if you're going to have these uniforms, why do you want to muddle things up? Why do you want pilots wearing dresses and things like that? I mean, you either have a standardised uniform or allow people to choose. I mean, it's more madness in the culture wars as far as I know.
Maybe it's more comfortable in a dress when you're flying a plane. I don't know. I've never done it.
Yeah, it might be more comfortable for the pilot. I don't know if the passengers would be as comfortable.
There was a case not long ago of a pilot, I can't remember for which airline, on a long-haul transatlantic flight, and I've got a friend who does that, and he said it's so boring, just cruising along at Thursday. And he was caught with... he'd removed his trousers and he was wearing stockings and had his feet up on the...
Is that... Nah.
It's true.
It's
true. No.
It sounds at best very unprofessional.
Well, he obviously, as Freddie suggested, felt more comfortable getting a bit of a breeze there. Yeah. But no, that happened. I don't mind if somebody comes, whatever sex they are, coming down the aisle in a skirt, as long as they've got nice legs.
Yeah.
And I don't mind any... So I'm just going to be totally sexist now. Well, it's not actually, because I'm not discriminating between the sex. I think you should wear what you feel best in and present best in. So if you've got a nice bum, wear trousers. If you've got good legs, wear a skirt. But I think the actual name is offensive, virgin.
Yes,
because it alludes to somebody's sexual history, and I think that's offensive.
It discriminates against people who've had sex.
Yeah, or not.
Moving on. Liz, The Times, yeah, exactly, yeah. You can keep your palazzo, says Meloni. Is this the new Italy's new leader? And what is palazzo?
The palazzo is where the Italian Prime Minister traditionally works and has an office.
Right.
It's a very opulent, grand residence in Rome, and she's saying, we're not living there. We'll stay in our own house, not bringing up a 6-year-old there. Good for her.
Right.
As soon as she was elected, the media piled in, didn't they? She is super right-wing. She's sort of daughter of Mussolini. I was listening to her. I was thinking, well, where's the evidence for that exactly? And there's a clip on Twitter which is just fantastic. I like this. Macron described her as disgusting when she won. And she said to Macron, I'll tell you what's disgusting. Disgusting is when you exploit African countries to keep your nuclear power stations going by having kids mining for the ingredients. I think it's plutonium from one African country where 90% of the population haven't got electricity. And she cites this and says, so why don't you stop your imperialistic ways, your exploitation? Why don't you help African people live in the same conditions as in France? The answer to our problems is not to empty Africa into Europe. And these thoughts and policies resound with the Italian people. Do not dismiss, again, a democratically elected person who voices, as Alison Pearson, the columnist in The Telegraph, says today, the concerns of many, many ordinary people.
Yeah.
But I love the way she's really, turned on.
She's the first democratically elected Prime Minister of Italy, or she will be the first, since Berlusconi. So it's odd that there's all this panicking about democracy when democracy gives the results that...
Yeah, although she's teaming up with Berlusconi, and he's well dodgy.
That shows what a canny politician she is. She's managed to form a very complicated coalition.
Yeah, and there's a lot of kind of familiar faces in that election, weren't there? Which must be quite depressing if you're an Italian voter. Across the board, it's a lot of the old faces, kind of same people are there.
Well, Italian democracy does throw up very strange results. I think, Five Star was this very odd left-wing coalition that came up not so long ago. It's a country where sort of protest voting is pretty popular.
Yeah.
Is Meloni a protest vote? I'm not sure she is. I think she's a bit cannier than that.
They don't like her because she's not one of the political family. She's not from a privileged background. She's from a working class background where her father was absent and her mother brought her up, a working single mother. She just doesn't, she's not from Macron's background.
Yeah.
Let's move on into the inside pages of The Telegraph, page 7, and there's the Imperial War Museum have weighed in on the benefits of violent video games.
Yeah, I feel I shouldn't have selected this story because this is a story I do not want my children to know
to hear about, OK.
Because apparently, according to the Imperial War Museum, violent video games are educational and useful. I mean, I guess they are in a certain way, and it's probably just a bit too easy to say that all violent video games should be banned and so on. But I think that, I'm not sure it's necessarily educational to sort of blow people's heads off all day long on screen.
But what's their their argument?
I think that actually what they say, which is right, is that these games are now so sophisticated, they get the historical setting right, and that children learn a lot about battles in history by playing these games. And I think there's a bit of truth to that. So I'm not entirely against the Imperial War Museum, even if I'm a bit nervous about what my...
You kind of see what they're saying, but maybe these games are a bit too graphic.
Yeah, I suppose you need the violence to draw the children in to the education, maybe.
Well,
I don't know how old your children are, but what kind of rules do you have over video games?
We have pretty strict rules, which they break quite a lot.
Right.
We do have.
I wonder whose fault that might be, Freddie.
It's when I'm in charge, things go wrong. But yeah, they always find a way. They always find a way. On any machine, they can find a way to play something that they shouldn't be playing, or look at something they shouldn't be looking
I kind of had a similar moment like that, but not with a video game, when I first saw Saving Private Ryan and that opening scene.
Yeah.
Which, do you remember how...
It was on and on and on, but
it was...
Yeah.
Yeah, and there were veterans watching it in the cinema, apparently, who were just taken right back there. So, and it does then... I mean, obviously, I watched that as a young adult, so then I thought, oh, OK, right, I get it more now.
Yeah.
So I do understand where they're coming from in that sense.
Yes, I mean, if it can convey the horror of war, that's good.
Yeah, maybe something you can absorb, though, when you're a young adult, as opposed to when you're 13. Yeah.
Let's move on to energy bills. We hinted at this earlier, actually, in some of our headlines, Liz, but spoon and gloom at Wetherspoons.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many articles. I picked a few on this topic because it's so relevant to all of us, just affording things to heat and, drive a car. Wetherspoons is to close about 30 branches. They've always been popular because they tend to salvage historic buildings like, an Art Deco theatre or something and turn it into a hospitality venue. They offer really cheaply priced breakfast and food and beer, and even they're struggling now because the price of hops being imported is going through the roof, beer's going through the roof, and also just heating the places. So they're kind of rationalising the stock, and this is going to happen to a lot of chains and establishments, I think. What I noticed when I was in Mallorca recently was all the sort of, with the pandemic, this was, I believe, because we're only just really out of it this summer, a lot of what the Americans call mom and pop shops or mom and pop restaurants, family owned by Spaniards, gone, and just the chains surviving. So it's a really tough environment. Of course, people hate Wetherspoons because the owner was such an ardent Brexit campaigner. So, of course, it's got to be... It's that Brexit what done. It serves you right. Anyway, it's not. But...
It gives you an idea of how big a challenge it is with it when Wetherspoons is having to make closures.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, then also on the energy costs, there's lots of articles as usual. The Sun's telling you to maybe not use your tumble dryer, maybe hang your clothes up. So I was just outside telling Freddie, giving him a top tip. Somebody I know has bought... Yeah, well, we both were. But somebody I know has bought one of these heated clothes drying racks.
Oh, yeah.
And apparently, if you put that on, it heats the whole room and it only costs 6p an hour.
Really?
So there's people are garnering all of it. I just bought an air fryer. I saw Stephen Dixon saying they were sold out on Friday. So I bought one. I went into this shop and the shelves were empty except for one. I grabbed it.
It was meant to be.
It was the Mo Farah air dryer, honestly, branded with Mo Farah.
Really?
Yeah.
Mo
so I
Farah.
thought, this will be the fastest one.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a bit upset it's pulled out to the marathon now.
Well, that doesn't bode well for your metaphor, does it?
Doesn't bode well for my roast chicken on Sunday. But yeah, so we were saying now you've got all these appliances like that you can use instead of putting the oven on. And plus there's all this clothing as well. I bought a fleece like halfway down my car and big furry slippers to go with it. Yeah. And my cousin said, you look all right. I can't say it on it, but I don't care.
Don't care, I'm warm.
Yeah, I'm warm. What I was wondering about the gas, the electricity and gas caps on the unit price that are costing this government and us more than any other part of last week's mini-budget. This means, does it, that if you have got an electric car, your motoring is now being subsidised by the rest of the taxpayers, whereas if you've got a petrol or diesel car, you're paying a real whack at the pumps because of fuel duty and
one would have thought so if you charge it at home.
Yeah, if you charge it at home.
But not when you charge it at other points.
Yeah, but if you charge it at home, you're getting it subsidised by about 75% by people who haven't got an electric car. I think I might have to get one.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, they're about 40 grand, so maybe...
Are you going to get an air fryer?
I'm not going to get an electric car. I'm thinking about an air fryer, but we've just got a bread
And what
maker.
about heated clothes?
Heated clothes sound quite appealing to me.
Yeah.
I like the idea of them.
Yeah, I'm loving these top tips. This is great. Thank you, Liz. Thank you.
Freddie, Liz, thank you very much for joining us all of this morning on Breakfast, going through the papers. Right now, though, it is 10 minutes to 9.
It's BGC Charity Day 2022 today. They are an American financial services company. It's their annual commemoration of colleagues lost in the 9/11 World Trade Center attacks.
Well, raising money on a London City trading floor today are going to be some celebrities, Damian Lewis, Holly Willoughby, Rio Ferdinand, who are hoping that they can help raise millions for charitable causes.
Yeah, I wonder if she'll skip the queue. Ellie Costello is there for us. Ellie, is anyone famous that I don't recognise there yet?
Good morning, Paul. Good morning, Rosie. And yes, it's going to be a really, really busy day. It's kicking off in about 10 minutes. This is BCG Charity Day 2022. We're going to be seeing the brokers, some of which are behind me right now, joining celebrities to try and raise millions of pounds for charity. And you can see, actually, the jackets that they're wearing are the traditional jackets that they would wear back in the day on the trading floor. And what they have on their sleeves is what they are trading on. So we're on the sterling desk right now, obviously trading in sterling, but there's other jackets around the room, and you can already feel the excitement in the atmosphere building as they get ready to start making those trades at 9 a.m. That's when the celebrities will start to arrive. They're all going to be on the phones asking those clients to give millions of pounds to charity today, and all of these brokers are actually going to be giving away their commission. They're all working for free today. All of that money is going to charities, not only 9/11 charities, but British ones as well. But usually this happens every single year on the 11th of September to commemorate the 658 BCG employees that died in the 9/11 attacks in the World Trade Center in New York in September 2001. Well, earlier I spoke to the COO, Sean Windiat, who told me more about the day and about the colleagues that he lost.
It all started obviously from the terribly sad events of 2001, Sep 11, when we lost everybody in our building who was in the building in New York at that time, and for us, having the first thing for us to do was to look after the families, the people that we lost, and the people, the fire service people helping out in New York on that day, and once we'd done that, the next thing to do was we thought we now need to embrace that day, turn it into something much more positive, and raise a lot of money for charity.
And Sean, you actually were there on that day, weren't you? You were here in London, you were speaking to colleagues in the US. This must mean so much to you, this day.
Oh, look, this day is one of, look, it starts off as a very sad day for me because you remember, and exactly as you said, I was actually on the phone talking to one of my colleagues in New York at the time. And then, so whenever you start this day, you start in a little dark moment and you have those personal thoughts. And then what better way to remember it, though, by then turning it into something positive. And this Charity Day, as you say, the 18th Charity Day, is always such a special day in our calendar.
So that's Sean Windiat there. He's the COO of BCG. And as he said, this started as a 9/11 charity fundraiser. Now it has evolved into helping so many British charities. You can see here Batty Cats and Dogs Home. They're going to be supported today. St Francis Hospice as well, and Havens House Children's Charity. All of these names so familiar to many British people and very close to many British people's hearts as well. And we're going to see many celebrities here today. They'll be arriving in the next 10 minutes. We're going to see the likes of Sadie Frost, Damian Lewis, Rio Ferdinand, Holly Willoughby, all of these names coming together with the brokers to raise millions of pounds for really good causes.
Ellie, thank you very much. We're going to be checking back in with Ellie across the morning as the day gets underway.
Back to our top story at 8:53. Liz Truss has said difficult decisions need to be made to get the economy moving. Let's speak now to the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden. Morning to you, Pat. Good to speak to you. These difficult decisions, how would Labour take them?
They're not difficult decisions, they're wrong decisions. Last Friday was an act of recklessness that was unforced. The government didn't have to do this, and they chose to implement a series of measures which have resulted in enormous financial and economic instability, starting with the fall in the value of the pound, spreading through the mortgage market, where we've seen banks and building societies withdraw hundreds of products. And yesterday, we almost had a situation where major pension funds were running into trouble. So this has been a reckless act of choice. It's not some tough decision that was necessary, and it's resulted in enormous instability for the country.
But the Bank of England did their job yesterday, and there has been some stability. And some of the commentators we've been speaking to this morning have said that headlines like saying there could have been pensions collapse are exaggerated. Really, what I think that the crux of what we're getting at is, if Labour were in charge, what would you do differently?
Well, right now we'd say we've got to pause this package that was announced last week. That's been the trigger for this. The government's also got to change the tone in which it's talking, because one of the important things is that after the measures were announced last Friday, and we had an initially adverse reaction in the markets with the pound dropping and so on, the Chancellor went out and said, this is just the beginning. We're going to do more of this. There are going to be more unfunded tax cuts. So it wasn't just what they did on Friday, it's been the way that they've handled it since then. And that has sent these ripples around the world, with the bank having to intervene yesterday. But that's just a short-term specific intervention. The bank have still got to make their decisions with regard to interest rates, which will affect people's mortgages in the weeks to come. And we've also had the extraordinary warning from the IMF, the kind of warning that's usually only issued to an emerging market country and not a major developed G7 economy like the United Kingdom. So the important thing is to revisit the measures, but also not to try to double down on this and say that they'll do even more of it in the future. That's what's needed to restore some stability right now and to make credibility back on track.
If Labour were in party now and they'd made the same mistakes, how would you make up for it? What would Labour do going forward?
We wouldn't make the same mistakes because this was a crisis made in number 10 and 11 Downing Street. And it's important that people understand this, because the country's had to do quite a lot of borrowing in recent years. First, to get through COVID, and the markets understood that because other countries had to do it. We had to have schemes like furlough and help to businesses and so on. And then with energy prices, there needed to be more borrowing too. And again, markets understood that. Governments had to intervene to protect consumers. The thing that really triggered the reaction we've seen in the UK in recent days was this unforced, reckless act of last Friday. So that's why we've called for Parliament to be recalled, for this package to be paused and revisited. And when I see the Prime Minister out today saying that she's going to carry on and dig in and so on, I really am asking myself the question, what is more important here? The Chancellor and the Prime Minister saving face, or saving the mortgages of millions of people?
Pat McFadden, really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you for your time. Pat McFadden there, the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury. We're joined in the studio now by Liam Halligan, our Business and Economics Editor. Liam, how's the pound looking, first of all?
The pound is holding up for the most part. It's off slightly this morning, but it seems to be holding up. As I said throughout the day yesterday, after that Bank of England intervention, which I described as the first step on the rung of the sort of emergency measures ladder, the pound, it seemed to work. It stabilised the currency. Far more importantly, the pound gets all the headlines, but far more importantly, it stabilised what we call the gilts market, which is where the government sells its debt, where the government borrows, and those borrowing costs came down from over 4.5%, Paul, below 4%. They're just slightly above 4% this morning. That is absolutely vital. That's the borrowing cost that ripples out across the economy, people's mortgages, people's personal loans. Of course, if you're on a fixed-rate mortgage, you're on a fixed-rate mortgage. That's not going to change. It seems to me, though, that the ante is being upped, if you like, politically. You've got the former Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, doing the rounds this morning, saying that he thinks the government is undercutting the Bank of England. That's certainly a debate to be had. And, of course, Labour are making hay with this because they're trying to beat the Tories on their home turf of financial competence, economic responsibility. There was a kind of warm glow among the Labour Party faithful in Liverpool, where I was with the GB News team for the Labour Party conference, and they want to carry that on. The more turmoil there is in financial markets, the more Labour will present themselves as being the natural party of responsibility and government. A little bit of turmoil this morning, but not so much. But hey, you know, it's only 9 o'clock.
Liz Truss is saying in interviews she's done this morning with local media that she had to make difficult and tough, controversial decisions. Is that enough of a defence for you?
I think she did have to make tough decisions. And look, interest rates everywhere are going up, OK? We have had, since the global financial crisis, Rosie, of 2008-9, we have had interest rates ultra low. We've had massive money printing across the world. As interest rates go up, because we're now in a more inflationary environment, as some of us have been warning for many, many years, that is going to squeeze borrowers. That's what's happening. And as central banks around the world take away all that money printing, financial markets aren't going to like it. They've been using it as a kind of, you know, nose bag for many, many years. So this is partly because of what the government said. I think the top rate of tax cut was politically ill-judged. I think everyone now can see that. But it's not as if the UK is the only country that's grappling with these issues. It's just that by doing the budget the way that they did, because the UK is a high-profile place, partly because we have a very, very vociferous media in the English language that goes around the world, you know, it's the UK and sterling and our borrowing that is in the crosshairs, if you like, of global markets. And I can't see that changing anytime soon.
Well, so there are global factors, undoubtedly.
Massively.
And Liz Truss this morning has said, in the past few minutes, Putin is primarily to blame. Now, of course, the war in Ukraine is partly, that is causing some of these problems. But is Putin primarily to blame?
I think primarily is a strong word, because even before this ghastly war in Ukraine, inflation was already elevated. You know, inflation was already at a 30-year high in this country in January, and Putin invaded on the 24th of February. It wasn't Putin that, you know, forced central banks across the Western world, not least the Bank of England, to endlessly create money, endlessly print money with investment banks and financial markets urging ministers, urging the Bank of England to do that, because they were getting rich from it, because it was pushing up share prices. You know, anyone who had shares has done very well off the back of all this money printing. But she has put her finger on something, and it's this, Paul, and it's something I've been saying now ever since the mini budget. Look, these tax cuts, this top rate of tax cut, it costs 2 billion quid. Big money, nothing. It's a rounding error when it comes to the public finances. If you cut the top rate of tax, the Treasury may even get more money, right? So that isn't the fiscal problem here, though it is, of course, the political problem, because it seems so indulgent when...
it doesn't look good, does
when people are concerned about paying their gap.
And the markets moved significantly after that announcement on Friday.
No, they did, but maybe they moved because the Bank of England didn't raise interest rates. The Bank of England raised... Just let me finish the point, Rosie. The Bank of England raised interest rates by a lot less than many people thought it would. But where Liz Truss has put her finger on something is this. The real driver of our fiscal position of the public finances over the next weeks and months is the price of wholesale gas. Why do I say that? Because the government has written an open-ended cheque, and nobody would say they shouldn't have done this, guaranteeing that £2,500 average fuel bill across Britain, guaranteeing for 6 months at least companies equivalent support. How much that costs to deliver depends entirely on the gas price. If the gas price keeps going up a lot, then that will cost the British government hundreds of billions of pounds. If the gas price comes down, and it has been coming down a lot over the last 3 or 4 weeks, it's down by about 50%, then we're talking, you know, 50 billion, 60 billion, maybe even less. So it's really all about the price of gas, because the UK, and again, this isn't Russia's fault, but Russia is having an implication here. The UK is unusually exposed because we don't have much energy storage. We are reliant on those interconnectors. We have massively wound down our coal-fired energy, and our nuclear isn't only a fifth of what we do. So a huge swirling mass of geopolitics, domestic politics, financial fear and greed, and many people at home and in their cars across the country listening to this discussion who are understandably concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. Liam, good to talk to you. Liam Halligan there, our business and economics editor, on GB News Breakfast. It is 4 minutes past 9. Let's bring you up to date with what is happening this morning.
As we've been reflecting this hour and hopefully explaining the complexity of it to you, the Bank of England's launched a government bond buying programme as it takes emergency action to stabilise the UK's economy. The bank announced it's buying £65 billion worth of bonds to prevent borrowing costs from spiralling out of control.
Households are being urged to take their energy meter readings ahead of a price hike on the 1st of October. That's Saturday. It'll prevent firms from estimating usage and charging energy used before Saturday at a higher rate. The energy regulator Ofgem will raise the price cap to £3,549 from October the 1st.
Hurricane Ian's made landfall in southwestern Florida. The Category 4 storm brings with it winds of up to 150 miles per hour. The governor of Florida is warning of power cuts for potentially millions and is urging people to seek shelter.
So Mo Farah has pulled out of the London Marathon this Sunday due to an injury. Four-time Olympic gold medalist hurt his right hip in training. He said he'd done everything he could to be on the start line in what would have been his first marathon since 2019, but will not be fit enough to run.
6 minutes past 9. Now, best known for TV shows like Walking the Nile and Walking the Himalayas, explorer Levison Wood is no stranger to travelling in some of the world's harshest environments.
With his latest tour kicking off next month, Levison joins us this morning to tell us all about it. Let's explore the art of exploration. Levison, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Good morning.
First of all, what can we expect from this tour?
So, like a lot of people during lockdown, I was sort of, stuck at home with plenty of time on my hands to think about things, and I spent most of it trying to collate the ideas and sort of lessons that I'd learnt from the best part of 20 years of travelling, and put them in a book called The Art of Exploration. So the stage tour around the UK is really me trying to sort of impart some of that wisdom that I've learnt from some of the greatest, political, spiritual leaders around the world, and some of my own experiences as well. But, not everybody can get to travel around the world and go to exotic places. So really the lessons are, what can you do with those in daily life too, whether you're transitioning your career, leaving school, about to retire. So there's practical lessons in there for people who might not necessarily want to go and walk the length of the Nile.
Life's a journey.
There we go.
It's about the explorer's mindset,
Correct,
I guess.
yeah.
Who is the sort of the explorer?
I think we can all be explorers. I think deep in all of us, it's in our DNA. We evolved as human beings to be curious, and really that's what this tour is all about. It's tapping into the inner explorer that really is in each and every one of us. And I think we can when you do that, you can really bring out the best version of yourself. If you have a positive mindset, if you are curious and take yourself out of your comfort zone, then you can grow and develop as a person.
Yeah. So you've done Walking the Nile, Walking the Himalayas, Walking the Americas, Walking with Elephants.
That's right, yeah.
What was the best one?
You know what, there's been so many incredible journeys. For me, actually, the one that really resonated probably the most was a journey I did back in 2017, 2018, just before COVID, all the way around the Arabian Peninsula through the Middle East. I went through Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, all the places that the news tells you not to go to. But, I had an incredible time. I was treated to some incredible hospitality, and learned a lot about a very misunderstood culture.
Yeah.
Part of your job, you're talking about going to places you're not supposed to, was ended up being helping journalists get across borders so they could get into these places. Journalists have also got that kind of exploring mindset.
Yeah.
What part of the job is taking you to unusual places do you enjoy the most in terms of facilitating other people getting access to areas they wouldn't have been able to go to?
I think it's about shining a spotlight on places that otherwise wouldn't get any sort of information out of them. So it's working with very remote communities around the world, indigenous communities, people who've got an interesting story to tell, and doing it away from the sort of mainstream sort of angle. So not going with an agenda really, and just telling it how it is.
Yeah, and actually another interesting story you have is that you have a previous career in the army and you served in Afghanistan. Yeah, just how does that compare to what you do now?
Well, you know, that obviously informed a lot of what I'm doing now. That explorer's mindset. You know, in the military, I was in the parachute regiment. I served in Afghanistan. But you learn to really push yourself. You learn to be able to assess risk, and actually, risk is something we should embrace. It's not something we should run away from. It's understanding risk. It's being able to mitigate it and being able to say, you know what, we can make big, bold, courageous decisions.
Which is very relevant to the current political climate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All of this started, well, I don't know if this was the start, but you did what you've described as a very cliched gap year when you were 18.
I did.
Would you still encourage people to do those type of trips? Because sometimes people feel a bit embarrassed to say, like, oh, I did the kind of Thailand route or whatever they did.
There's nothing wrong with that. You know, I did the whole Thailand route. I backpacked around India. You know, I had my hippie phase. But look, I think when you go travelling as a youngster, you know, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn about independence. You learn about things like budgeting, you know, how to sort of stretch that pound to go a long way, something we can all sort of, you know, I suppose need to get used to in this current climate. But, you know, I think it's a really important, some very important life lessons. And look, you don't need to spend a lot of money to go travelling. You don't need to go to the ends of the earth, you know. Finding a bit of adventure in whatever you do in life, even if it's just here in the UK, just push yourself, get out of that comfort zone, and you can learn a hell of a lot.
Right, this is fascinating, and the tour sounds like it's going to be brilliant, and the book looks brilliant. I look forward to reading it. But have you ever done an all-inclusive in Lanzarote?
You know what? I did actually do Club 1830.
Oh, you did? So you have done that? All right.
I've been to Ibiza plenty of times.
Yeah, right. OK, great, excellent. Really good to talk to you.
Lovely, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Leveson. Leveson Wood there, whose book, The Art of Exploration, is out now, and he's embarking on that tour around the country. So is it levesonwood.com if you want to find out where he'll be.
You'll find it. Right. It is 11 minutes past 9. After the break, we're going to be speaking to the 4-year-old who gave the Princess of Wales a bouquet of flowers when the royal couple visited Anglesey. That's next.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to GB News Breakfast, 30 minutes past 9. We're hoping to speak to the Chief Secretary of the Treasury shortly. But before that, earlier this week, the new Prince and Princess of Wales visited Holyhead, where One lucky boy was chosen from the crowd to meet Kate, and that boy was 4-year-old Theo Crompton.
Theo's mother, Rebecca, never expected that the sweet moment between her son and the princess would go viral. And very good morning, clue to both of them now. Theo, I know it's early. Thank you for chatting to us. It looks like maybe we've made you late for school. Theo, what was it like when you met the princess?
What was it like?
Hi, Theo.
It's just gone so shy. I don't know where it's come from. It wasn't shy before.
Rebecca, thank goodness he didn't go shy when that big moment happened. What was it like for you, managing everyone's expectations and thinking, just how's this going to go?
I just didn't know what was going to happen. I originally got told, could he have a photograph with the princess? And I was over the moon. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He was so excited. And it just went from there, really. I was so shocked. I just didn't know what to do. I was so emotional, everyone was talking, and I just couldn't pull it together.
Yeah, and Theo, I mean, we totally understand why Theo's feeling a bit shy at the moment. What has he said about meeting her?
He said she's very pretty and he loved her red dress.
Oh, that was a very good evaluation. Why did you think it was important to kind of go and mark that moment?
It was a last-minute decision, totally last minute. I actually drove around the roundabout twice, weighing it up, and I just thought it was once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Or did you want to go and try and meet the prince and princess, thinking we was going to just give a wave to them and maybe take a couple of pictures? And we decided just to go and get some flowers.
Yeah.
And
would you call yourself monarchist? Are you a big fan of the royal family?
Oh, I do. I love watching them. I mean, I was really upset, obviously, with everything that happened with the Queen. Obviously sceptical of what was going to happen next, because the Queen, everyone just knows about the Queen. There's nothing different. And to see them the other day, they're fantastic people. They're so down to earth, the way she spoke to Theo. You could just tell she was great with kids, great family, great morals.
And the moment that she had with your family, I guess that's just thought to really establish even those views even more strongly.
Sorry, I missed that. Sorry.
Don't worry. Obviously, your interaction has only strengthened those positive views of the royal family.
Yes, I just can't believe how nice they are. They're so down to earth, and I just can't wait for the future to see what will happen when they do become the future king and queen, because it's a memorable moment we'll never have again.
Well, thank you for sharing it with us, and thank you to Theo as well. And sorry that we've really interrupted your morning. We really appreciate the time, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Lots of you have been... Well, what a moment.
What a moment.
Yeah, I was thinking, he's already had his moment in the spotlight. I think that was enough for him.
Bless him.
Loads of you have been getting in touch. I mentioned earlier this, but there's actually been quite a lot of anger in sort of twofold. One, at what's happened to the economy, and we're going to... Liam Halligan's joining us again in just a second. But also, quite a lot of people angry about how it's being covered, saying maybe the language that some of the press and the media... For example, I mean, the front page of the Times here says banks spend $65 billion to avert pensions collapse, saying maybe it's words like collapse that are a bit strong. Lots of you getting in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Too many. Some of them are quite strong feelings. Anne says, why were the pension funds in such a leveraged position that they were unable to pay the margin calls that inevitably followed the lower prices of gilts? Anne is someone who understands finances.
And I think that's one for Liam.
And then she said that's what mainly caused the intervention by the Bank of England. Please keep your messages coming in. We're doing our best to try and explain it all for you here this morning. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Liam is in the studio with us.
Yeah, Liam, let's put this to you then. I don't know if do you want me to repeat that one for
I heard it.
Right. Why were the pension funds in such a leveraged position that they were unable to pay the margin calls that inevitably followed the lower prices of gilts? What does that mean?
Let's unpack that. So what leverage means is debt. So you get big fund managers who borrow money and then buy more bonds, buy more stocks, because if you buy more stuff and your bet goes right, you make more money, and then you pay back the loan and you're left with a bigger gain. That's called leverage, because you're leveraging up your profits. But what leverage does is it also magnifies losses when the bets go wrong. And because gilts were getting less attractive to hold because of more inflation and a sense that the government was playing fast and loose with the public finances, the values of those gilts, the values of those bonds goes down. Those funds that have borrowed money off banks to do their leverage hocus pocus stuff, the banks then demand their money back because what the funds have, their worth, their collateral is worth less. So then, I never thought I'd explain this on national television, but I did spend 6 years of my life as a fund manager.
But it is important, isn't it?
And then the banks say to the fund managers, the insurance companies and so on that they've lent money to, we don't like the look of your financial position now. The value of the stuff that you hold is worth less than it was. You have to post some collateral, or we are going to demand back all the money. And if you read the fine print of the deal, when we lent you the money, we can demand our money back at any time. So those funds then become forced sellers. They have to sell their stuff to get the money to pay back the banks, or they go bust. And that's what was happening here. And to the question, I totally agree. I've been campaigning for this most of my journalistic career. There's far too much leverage in financial markets. The idea that they can borrow money and then bet and then demand some kind of bailout when things go wrong.
So to borrow one of Linda's phrases, one of our GB News viewers who we were talking to earlier, they need to live more within their means and borrow less.
Yeah, they need to be more prudent. You know, big fund managers, I should say the fund manager I work for, we never used any leverage.
Yeah.
And really smart investors, the charities, the local authorities that invested with us, like the fact that we didn't use leverage to magnify our profits. But this is what happens in our financial services industry, and I would have regulation. People in the city won't like me for this, but I've argued this for a long time. We shouldn't be using these big pumped up bets with big funds borrowing loads of money to magnify their profits, because then that just magnifies their losses.
Yeah.
Lots of people are talking doom, catastrophe. Explain to us, if you can, in sort of the most basic terms possible, Liam. I know it's not necessarily easy, what the actual implications are of the financial situation that we've inherited this morning.
OK, I do think that broadcasters, newspaper writers who often don't know what they're talking about do use hyperbolic language, and I do think we need to consider more how that impacts ordinary folk who are working hard and trying to do their best for their family. You know, a lot of journalists are pretty well-off people without financial worries that a lot of other people in walks of life have. So we always need to be responsible in terms of the language that we use. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of GB News. I think we have been relatively responsible. I should say that, present company included, of course. Where we are now is that the Bank of England's intervention yesterday, it looks to have worked. It looks to have held the road. The pound is a lot more stable than it was. Borrowing costs in those gilts market where the government borrows, the government sells its debt, that borrowing costs rippling out across the economy to new mortgage offers, not fixed, to new mortgage offers, to personal loans and so on. Those borrowing costs have come down quite sharply for now. But this is clearly a movable feast. There's clearly a lot of politics going on here. A lot of people in international organisations who, you know, don't necessarily wish the UK well, let's put it that way, and are on the opposite side of the political fence to Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, even though they're not meant to be acting in a political capacity. A lot of scores are being settled, but for now at least, what the Bank of England has done looks sensible, it looks proportionate, and it looks, early days, it looks to have stabilised the situation.
Did what the government do, was that sensible and proportionate?
Now, I've been saying for ever since the mini-budget, the top rate of tax cut, even though it doesn't really amount to a hill of beans in terms of the impact on the government's budget and its taxing and spending projections, I do think it was politically tin-eared to do that at a time when a tax cut, basically for people who earn more than 150 grand a year, you know, pretty well-off people, to do that as we're going into a cost of living crisis. It's not even as if the Tory backbenchers wanted it. There's a few, you know,
all the top rate of taxpayers.
Yeah. There's a few sort of more kind of sound, that's the word they use, MPs among the Tory right who are like, hooray, this is great, this is great. But I was getting loads of WhatsApp messages from Tory MPs saying, why has she done this? I can't explain this to my constituents when I see them this weekend. So I do think that was a mistake. That kind of created a political atmosphere where the government was going to come in for a kicking. And when governments come, you know, markets, they're not just about all the technical stuff I've been talking about. They're about sentiment, politics and emotion. And I think it created the wrong mood.
Liam, thank you. Our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan. We can speak now to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Chris Philp. Chris, thanks for joining us on GB News.
Hello.
First of all, I don't know if you heard there our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, saying that, in his opinion, politically, you got it wrong when you gave tax cuts to the rich. The optics of that do not look good at a time when a lot of people are struggling at the other end.
Well, a couple of points to make on that. I mean, firstly, if you look at the growth plan measures announced by the Chancellor last Friday, only 1/20th, that's less than 5%, were the removal of the top rate of tax. Most of those measures were things like cutting the basic rate of income tax, reversing the national insurance increase, reducing or keeping low taxes on companies, which benefit, I mean, everybody. The income tax cut and the national insurance cut benefit every single worker, 30 million people in the United Kingdom. The energy intervention was very important as well. We're making sure that people don't suffer those £5,000, £6,000, £7,000 bills they feared just a few weeks ago. We've made sure the British public don't suffer from those terrible energy bills. So almost everything in that package was targeted at sort of the whole country, not just a few people. That's the first point to make. The second point to make on the 45p specifically is that we want to make sure the United Kingdom is internationally competitive for personal tax and for corporate tax, because many companies and also very successful people have a choice about where they locate. They don't have to come to the UK. They could locate in New York or they could locate in Singapore. We want to make sure they choose to come and grow in the United Kingdom, which is good for our economy. It'll create extra jobs. It'll ultimately pay more tax revenues to fund the NHS, education and the police as well. So that is the rationale for doing it.
The impact, though, was not, I imagine, what you expected. Why was it that the economy, the markets, got left in a state by which the Bank of England had to intervene to avoid what they said would be a material risk to financial stability?
Well, the Bank of England yesterday used their independent powers to make a very specific, targeted and time-limited intervention in a rather technical part of the market. It was the long end of the gilt curve and the way that interacted with certain kinds of very particular pension funds. They did that and it was successful. Other central banks in recent days have intervened as well. In fact, the Bank of Japan just a few days ago made a very particular intervention in the yen-dollar market. But the reaction I thought was most important to the growth plan was from British businesses, from the CBI, the Confederation of British Businesses, from the Federation of Small Businesses and from the British Chambers of Commerce, who on Friday strongly welcomed this growth plan because they know that their members will be able to grow more quickly, invest more, create more jobs and higher paid jobs as a result of this growth plan. And that is the reaction I think that is the most important one, because it'll put this country on the path to higher growth, which is good for families and households because it'll mean more jobs and higher earnings, and it'll be good news for public services because it'll generate a more sustainable tax base to fund those critical things like the NHS, education and the police.
We've had the Institute for Economic Affairs on this morning, who are normally very supportive of Liz Truss and her brand of economics, and they're supportive of what you're doing broadly. But the one criticism that they said was the way in which you conveyed that mini budget without issuing a forecast from the Office for Budget Responsibility, without giving those reassurances around the figures and how you're going to fund this. That was why the markets were jumpy, and that perhaps you could have communicated that message better. Do you accept that?
Well, I think markets globally have been volatile for the last 6 or 9 months, mostly as a result of Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine. On the question about the OBR, we are obviously going to be publishing an OBR full scorecard on the 23rd of November. Into that will feed not just the Friday measures, but a series of supply-side reforms, so reducing the burden of regulation on business, for example, that are going to be announced in the coming weeks. The Chancellor will also set out his medium-term fiscal plan, making sure that debt to GDP falls over the medium term. And we should keep in mind, of course, that debt to GDP in the UK is already the second lowest in the G7. As Chief Secretary, I can tell you that we're going to be having iron discipline on sticking to the existing spending plans. That's very important, and we're going to make sure we firstly find the efficiencies to let us do that, but also make sure we prioritise public spending, which is of course all funded by taxpayers' very hard-earned money. We prioritise that on the most important frontline public services and also things that are going to drive economic growth.
You've mentioned global factors there, but we also know before Putin's invasion in January of this year, inflation was at a record high. It can't all be answered away that easily. How much responsibility does the UK government take, the current UK government take, for the state of the market and the value of the pound today?
Well, I mean, look, inflation has been a problem globally. Interest rates have been rising globally for the last 6 or 9 months. And in fact, they've gone up by more in the United States than they have here. What we can do as a government is make sure that we protect British citizens from the worst effects of the energy crisis, which we did with our decisive intervention, protecting every single British household and British business. We need to make sure we've got a growing economy, to make sure wages are rising. That's our responsibility, and that's what the Prime Minister and Chancellor have been doing in the last couple of weeks.
Thank you very much for speaking to us, Chris. That's Chris Phil, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, giving us the government's response to the current state of the markets and the economy. Lots more on that story, developing story, of course, looking at the value of the pound throughout the day and throughout the coming weeks here on GB News.
That is it from us, though, this morning. Coming up, of course, we'll have the briefing with Emily Carver.
Hello, good morning. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a chilly start out there this morning with some low cloud and fog, but soon enough, sunshine and showers will follow. And actually, it will be a touch warmer this afternoon compared with the last few days. Low pressure is moving away. That's heading towards Denmark. Around that low, we've still got this cool north to northeasterly airflow, and a weather front has sunk south overnight. That's clearing the southwest first thing. Showers moving away as it clears, and a blustery wind here. Elsewhere, any early low cloud and fog clearing away. Brighter skies follow into the afternoon, and actually for many, sunny spells will prevail through the afternoon. But there will be a few more showers turning up, especially around the north and the east of England, parts of central and eastern Scotland, for example. 16 to 18 Celsius typically, so a little warmer compared with recent days. The highest temperature